Hey, we are live. What's going on, everyone? We've got a fun Reaper Locals today to play through, so should be pretty good. Sorry for the lack of videos lately. I've sort of been. I took a gamble on the first Teledad video that I was going to make, and the gamble, you could say it paid off or didn't pay off, but it means that I basically will not be able to make it just yet. I'll be making it relatively soon, though, so don't worry about that. But yeah, in the meantime, we got Reaper locals, and we'll be having Cat locals next week to prepare for the Cat tournament next month. I know it seems weird talking about Cat already, given I haven't really done any gameplay videos for Teledad yet, but don't worry, Teledad will go quickly once it's there. Oh, Steven Yurosevic wants me to embrace the science. There is a scientist tournament going on today on the Science Sackers Discord server. And scientist is a format that is very sort of, I wouldn't say controversial, but, people either hate it or they love it. And so I'm glad that people are, playing it. And yeah, unfortunately, I don't have the time to join another tournament right now. But if you are interested in that, head on over to, well, I don't have the scientist Discord linked below, but if you head on over to my Discord server, the YGO from Zero Discord, then you can find the link to the scientist Discord server there. But as is now, we've got a Reaper event here. There's no scientist in Reaper, unfortunately. There are Stein OTKs, though, so that is something that is sort of what Reaper is known for in some respects. But yeah, as is now, we are going to be starting this thing off. So I'm going to be changing the settings of the locals here to unranked because, people like to join with silly decks sometimes. So we're going to do that. And then we're going to get this party started. So starting off the event. There we go. We're going to shuffle because this is a, locals. It's not a serious thing. And yeah, we are getting this party started. So let's dive in to the event. And we got some good games going on here. We couldn't quite get 8 people, but that's fine. 7 is still good. And yeah, it'll just mean one person has a bye. So that's PJ in this case. But as is, we got Wagmap versus Sentenza, Fife Men versus Jimbob, Yaya Chaotico versus Dump Truck. So we'll be diving into those games shortly. Steven Yurosevic said, thanks for creating this community and being an overall good guy, Ben. Your work has given me a lot of joy in recent years. I mean, that gives me joy to hear that personally because that's why I do it. I do it to, give people something to enjoy. I enjoyed watching a lot of YouTubing content, especially during the pandemic. That's when I got into SEMO's History of Yu-Gi-Oh! Series and Progression series and, all those sort of YouTubers out there. So I figured if I could do something similar and potentially cultivate a community where we play these formats, then that would be a great thing. So I'm happy to hear that, and I hope you continue to enjoy them. Blind Venus, I'm also very excited for me to cover Teledad. My first video in Teledad will be a large one. It will be very, very big, probably the biggest dual replay video that I've done. And some of the games that I cover in it will be incredibly, incredibly good. Some of my favorite games that I've played just on this journey in general. So I hope that you enjoy it. It should be a lot of fun. Yeah, and I'm really excited just to dive into the nitty gritties of the Teledad mirror match because that is a very, very important interaction in this format. I mean, it's called Teledad for a reason. It's basically a tier 0 format. I will be showing off some other decks in the format. Like I'm probably going to show off Lightsworn. I might show off like an anti-meta deck as well. But there won't really be too many other decks that I'm going to cover despite the wealth of new cards that have been added to the format. It's just they can't really compete against Teledad, unfortunately. But, we'll see how many of those I do. It will get coverage, don't worry, but like it might not be as big as previous formats because I've noticed that like when I cover tier 0 formats or putative tier 0 formats at least, it is not really like it's not the most interesting thing for me to be like, oh, and you could play this deck, but it loses to like the deck in the format that everyone's playing. So like it basically me showing off a deck you could potentially build, but a deck that doesn't really do anything. And I feel like that's just sort of like a wet fart kind of for people who want to, watch a video about that deck. They likely want to see that deck win. And so if they just see the deck lose constantly against the tier 0 threat, then they're probably not going to enjoy the video. And it's also not really fun for me to like be playing that deck, just losing constantly with that. But Sentenza versus Muffins going on. Okay, let me see that one. All I saw were Jim Bob and Dump Truck there. Oh, yep, you're right. Thank you. So yeah, so Sentenza and Ragamuffin is going on. Sentenza starting here, and they're opening with a Trap Dustshoot. Dustshoot's going to be pretty good here. Dustshoot still at 3 copies in this format. Unfortunately, Dustshoot is one of my least favorite cards in the game because it's just like it's a card that is, and I think this was discussed a bit. Oh my god, double Dustshoot, even better. It's a card that is sort of like, and this was, I think there was a conversation on the Discord that happened recently about this sort of thing. But it's a card that's very powerful, but it can also be really bad, right? It just depends on the situation you draw it in. If you draw Dustshoot late game where your opponent has like no cards in hand, it's not good, and you're going to be upset that you drew it. But if you draw it early, then you're going to be very happy about it, but the opponent is also going to, be very upset. So either way, someone's going to be upset by this card, which compared to something like Raigeki, you're not really ever too upset to draw Raigeki. That card is going to have a lot of play most of the time, right? So like you draw Raigeki late game, you're happy about it. You draw it early game, you're happy about it. Your opponent won't be happy that you have the Raigeki, but you're always going to be happy that you have it, right? So it's a card that doesn't come with this sort of like, one person feeling negatively about it whenever they draw it, right? So that is one of the things I really dislike about Dustshoot. You can apply that to some of the other hand rips, but I feel like the other hand rips don't have this issue as much. Also, as I've talked about in the past, if you get like confied here, right? Like Nintendo got confied there. So they draw one additional card here, which means that, let's say, the last card in the hand was a back row, right? Like, let's say the Trap or something. And they drew another card, and then they set a back row on this turn and pass back to Wagamuffin. Then that one back row, Wagamuffin might have a guess as to what it is. It could be the set that they saw, or it could be the new card. So it's like you get a bit of mind gaming that you can do there, right? But it's like, you can't really play around that if it's Dustshoot because your opponent's perfect knowledge, right? So they'll know it has to be one of these cards. So it's kind of iffy. And as Blind being says, Dustshoot being flipped on you if you have combo is also really bad because like, it's just awkward there. Because like this format is so combo centric. If you're playing in Stein deck, and if your opponent sends back the key piece you need for the combo, you can just basically lose the game on the spot because your opponent can get you down below the 5,000 life point threshold, or they can combo you, and it's just so frustrating. So, yeah, it's not really my favorite card in the world. So yeah. And yeah, I mean, as PJ says, like you can play around it by getting your hand below 4 cards. Like they've been playing the Goat ladder, and that's a big thing in Goat where the shoot's also running around. Where like you do have to consider that, but if it happens first turn, you can't do anything about that, unfortunately. Not even like an MST first turn will get you there. I mean, if your opponent duos you first thing, right, and then you draw an MST, you can potentially just, priority use the MST to dodge around Dustshoot there. But then that's also, kind of forced on your part where you might want to save that MST for something else. So it's just kind of iffy either way. But Saku coming down here to stop the breaker. Solemn will stop that, so Sentenza will take game 1 of this match. I feel like we didn't really get to see too much about what each player was on. We did see that Wagamuffin was on a Monarch with the Mobius, so it seems like they're on Steinark, but you can never quite tell. Let's dive into Jim Bob versus Little Mist here. Wow, that is a pretty good situation for Jim Bob here. They got the Lily to attack into the Reaper, getting Little Mist down below that 5,000 life point threshold and just dealing a ton of damage. But it seems like both players are on Warriors, so that damage threshold doesn't matter quite as much when you're playing Warriors. Warriors can play Stein. I mean, they do have things like Exiled Force which tribute themselves to then fuel Last Will. But generally, Warriors want to be playing a bit differently. And this could be like even an Earth aggro list, doesn't necessarily be Warriors itself. Like you'd be playing Gigantes or things like that with the Lily. But this to me smells of Warriors here. And one of the nice things about Reaper format specifically, people have really explored it quite a bit because this was popularized by MBT when MBT and CMO reached it in History of Yu-Gi-Oh! MBT really liked it, so he made a Discord community for it, and a bunch of people hopped onto it because MBT is a very popular Yu-Gi tuber. So he has a big audience, and that audience wanted to test it out. Unfortunately, it's since lost that audience because a lot of people don't like dealing with Stein shenanigans, and that's what the format turned out to be largely. But because people have explored it so much, we do know a little bit more about this than we might otherwise. Is the sword supposed to still be up or no? Did that... I thought that got activated last turn. Or maybe I've just been talking so much that the turns just passed. Andrew Wydro1 says that they would have joined to make 8. Yeah, I waited a little bit after 3, but then someone asked, are we starting? And I was like, yeah, I might as well start. 7 and 8, like 8 is nice because it means that no one has a bye. But it's ultimately fine, so no worries. But yeah. Okay. The Assailant's getting flipped up here, so Assailant will be attacking into either the Set or the Lily. Maybe the Set. I would probably do the Set. Maybe it's a bit tricky. It depends on what you want to do here, because normally like you attack into the Set to force the opponent to attack in here, because it's like they're using an attack to do this. But the Assailant will make it so that like the Lily will be removed, so like you don't really need to sort of get the attack wasted there, so it's a bit tricky there. But yeah. PJ says, I also think when those guys MBT team have moved on to other stuff, so did the bulk of Reaper players. Yeah, that's true. MBT did play in a fair amount of the early Reaper tourneys, so you know he was involved, but you know eventually he didn't like it, so he stopped playing. And yeah, I think when you lose the sort of content creator at the heart of it, then it can be a bit tough to maintain the community. What's up, Dylan Ramirez? Things are going good with me. I've been a bit busy here, but yeah, it's just been unfortunate that I haven't been able to get out as much content, but I haven't had as much time for my like Wheel Wednesdays or general discussions. And for the Teledad content itself, I've been busy getting games for that. And that video will be coming out eventually. And it will be probably my longest dual replay video, because it's going to have a bunch of games and some quite long ones as well. But it should be a really, really good video. I'm really looking forward to making it once all is said and done. I just need to wait for certain conditions to be met to make it, which some people have already figured out what those conditions are. But I'll keep an air of mystery around it, you know, to make it a bigger thing than it is, you know. But yeah, I've been doing pretty good. So hope that y'all have been doing well as well. But yeah, this is a very grindy game here. And the nice thing about Reaper format is that, you know, grindy games happen quite frequently if you don't manage to get steined in the first couple turns, which is really, really enjoyable for people who like that sort of thing. Squish asks, has Spirits been tested? I'd have to go back to the old Reaper server, but people tested like everything. Like they were really going on like every single possible avenue they could with this format. So I wouldn't be surprised if Spirits have been tested, but unfortunately Spirits are, you know, they don't really have like a set game plan. There's not really something that you're like, oh yeah, Spirits do this. And that can make it a bit tough to build a deck like that. Also, Tsukiyomi is Tsukiyomi banned or limited? I forget, but Tsukiyomi is not really as good in this format as it is in GOAT format. So that makes it a bit tricky to do stuff with that. And Tsukiyomi is arguably the best spirit, so yeah, it's a bit tricky. Neither. I thought Tsukiyomi was hit here. Maybe that was next format. But I know that the GOAT combo has been hit. Like, I think Restrict is no longer in the picture really, in much capacity. You don't have like, I think Meta might be limited as well. I don't know. There's some, it's been a while since I've looked at the ban list. I just pull up the ban list as well just to have it. PJ says, Shameless Pug. Okay, it is limited. Okay, yeah. I was pretty sure it was limited because I'm pretty sure that they hit like most of the pieces of GOAT control. So yeah, I was pretty sure about that. Glad that my memory still served there. But yeah. Oh yeah, I know the card that you're talking about, Squish. It's the like continuous spell, right? That it's got like the picture of an Apple White Rabbit on it, I think. Or maybe that's a different spirit support card. But there is one that like whenever your spirits goes back to hand, your opponent also gets their monster back to hand. And you can combo that with like Spring of Rebirth as well, which triggers whenever any monster in the field is sent from field to hand. So that can like give you a bunch of life to protect yourself for taking damage if they summon out something else and attack in. So there is that, like, and that's like not a terrible card. It's just tough to get a lot of value out of the other spirits when the best spirits are like hit, right? Usually Sousa Soldier is a pretty good spirit. That'd probably be the next one that I'd go to. And Noble White Rabbit. Actually, Noble White Rabbit has seen some play in some burn decks. So Stallburn is a deck that people have actually managed to have great success with here in this format. And some versions do play a Noble White Rabbit, which can attack your opponent directly, bounce back to hand, then come down again next turn. So you can do that as well. There is Mystic Box, so you can do spirit swap stuff. I mean, there's also creature swap, so you can do that there. Creature swap has been sort of like a staple of like Dead Rat for quite some time. There's Fire Spirit. Which spirit are you referring to for the Fire Spirit? Are you referring to like the Tori one? That one's not like ideal, I don't think. there's I guess you'd go for the big ones, right? You could go for like Yamada Dragon or Hinoka Katsuchi. You'd go for those if you wanted to. But yeah, like I don't necessarily know if they're the best things in the world. They take a lot of setup, and there aren't really too many ways to abuse them in this format compared to other formats. But yeah, so you can try it. It's just getting tribute fodder on the field for those things consistently, like turn after turn, can be a bit tough. But you can definitely make it work if you want to. But yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. Like it's not really the most competitive thing. Like you can, the thing is like you can build like any deck as long as you're fine with it not really being competitive, right? Um, like I think even like Guardians, like you can make Guardians if you wanted to. It's just not going to be competitive in any capacity. But generally, when people talk about like trying out decks and building decks, they're talking about like in a competitive sense to actually make it so that like the decks can win somewhat consistently. Um, and so that's like sort of a different question there, right? But yeah, there is also a card that lets spirits stay on field as well. It kind of conflicts. Part of the issue with Spirit Support is that some of them try and do some things with the gimmick and some of them try to do other things with the gimmick. So you have the one that lets spirits stay on the field, but you also have the one that triggers whenever a spirit bounces to hand. So it's like, which one do you play in your deck, right? Because if you have one up and you draw the other, then it's like, it kind of conflicts, right? So it makes for kind of an awkward archetype, honestly. I wouldn't necessarily even call it an archetype. It's just sort of like a type at the end of the day, but this looks like it's going to be pretty bad for Jim Bob here. There's a lot of aggressive pressure here, potentially a lethal amount. Depends on what that set is here, though. If it's something like Gravekeeper's Spy, that could be very good. If it's something like a Ryukoki, that could also be very good, but it looks like it's not enough there. So Little Miss will take that game 1, and they're going to go on to game 2. Let's see if Dump Truck versus Yankiarako is up. It is indeed up. Yu-Gi-Oh! Commander, welcome back to the stream. I'm happy to see us grow as well, and hopefully we can continue growing. Yeah, we've sort of like plateaued a little bit right before 1900 viewers, but I assume that once I start reposting videos, people start trickling back in. It's just been a while since I've actually, had a video out. Which has been for a couple reasons. I allude to it in a community post that I made recently, but unfortunately, I sort of took a gamble on something, and the gamble made it so that like it'll be a much longer video when it comes out, but the first Teledad video will indeed be taking a little bit more time to make. So look forward to that, though. It should be a lot of fun when it does come out. Squish says you can play both to bounce all your opponent's monster back since they trigger all at once. Yeah, but can you choose to let a spirit go back to hand when you've got the one that prevents your things from going back? Or is it just like, because I thought that the one that bounced your opponent's stuff meant that like your spirit had to go back to hand to bounce the opponent's thing. So I could be wrong about that though. Oh, that would be cool. That would be a much cooler gamble to make. Maybe it's just me getting my motorcycle license to do motorcycle dueling. But no, unfortunately, Dylan, is not that. But it should still be cool, depending on what happens here. But okay, you destroy in standby phase. So like, does the card have like a maintenance cost that activates in standby phase that you can choose whether to keep up or not? Or is it just like I'm forgetting the exact wording of these cards. Like I did cover them on the channel because I covered the cards that came out like when Spirits first came out. I think it was like Legacy of Darkness, I want to say. And that had just a variety of cards for Spirits, but I don't quite remember the exact wording of a lot of them because they weren't quite relevant for the Spirit deck that I made in that format, and I never really touched Spirits again after that. But I think people have tried out some things with Spirits in various formats. It just has never quite panned out. Yeah. Okay, it looks like there might be debate over going to main 1 or not. This is mandatory, so yeah, I mean, it just says during your standby phase, select one random card from your opponent's hand, so it is mandatory. So I don't think that really matters. Sup, Vortex, how you doing? Yeah, we got a fun locals going on here, so that's what's up right now. Yeah, a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh going on today. There's also like an RBT going on. There's a like redo format tournament as well. So a lot of stuff going on. I guess Sunday's a busy time for Yu-Gi-Oh, especially retro Yu-Gi-Oh. But I mean, I'm just happy that people are playing retro Yu-Gi-Oh no matter how they're doing it, Oh, we got Uriah here. Uriah, very cool. Just a fun sort of jank deck that people have played in the past. But cool to see someone bring it back, representing it here. Was my weekend good? My weekend was pretty good. I got some work done, so that was nice. Also had a bit of time to relax as well. So yeah, nothing like too eventful this weekend. But honestly, I feel like a non-eventful weekend is a fun thing to have sometimes. You know, I feel like that's something that like as an adult, like it's just as a kid when you think about like weekends, you're like, oh, I want something to happen, right? I want to have like a big event happen and like go to that and do stuff like that. But as an adult, I'm just kind of like, nice, a nice chill weekend. I get to relax, you know, put my feet up and do all that stuff. So, yeah, it's just kind of funny how your priorities change uh, over time. But yeah, Uriah is very, very cool. BrainCon, though, is going to be so rough here. That will allow Dump Truck to also pop a back row there as well and get in for potential lethal. Solemn will be used on that. They're not going to allow the Uriah to be taken, so that's pretty rough. Uriah looks so much like, says Dagan Bozsuk. And sorry, I mispronounced your name. And yeah, definitely looks like Slifer a fair bit because these cards were sort of based off the Egyptian gods, sort of like their own variations of them. And, you know, it's kind of funny that we actually got playable versions of these in the TCG before we actually got playable versions of the Egyptian gods in the TCG. But the Uriah is going to pop that skill drain there. Honestly, Yankee is pretty happy about that. Don't necessarily want to flip up the skill drain to stop their own Uriah, but not bad there. Are they not going to attack? I feel like you might as well attack here. Can this not attack? No, it can attack the turn that you do this, I think. Oh, but it would have 0 attack. There are no continuous traps in the grave. Okay, I see. Seal, very, very neat tech here that will indeed buff this thing up to kill Dump Truck there. Squish says controversial take, but I think the 03 World Championship format is a better format than GOAT since there is no chaos. That's Yada format. If I believe it's Yada format. Yes, I believe it's Yada format. I do love Yada format a lot. I think Yada format is great. Yeah, it's one of my favorite formats. I covered it on the channel. I rank it as an S tier format, and I stand by that. I think it's very, very fun. I know that people sort of go back and forth on whether they prefer Fiber or Yada. I think it depends on the type of player you are, but I think if you're just sitting down and have some fun Yu-Gi-Oh!, Yada is a great format, and I hope that more people try it out. I think it is like quintessential DM era Yu-Gi-Oh!, and while there are power cards running around left and right, I think the power cards running around, it's kind of like the Syndrome meme from The Incredibles, where he's like, if everyone has superpowers, no one does. It's kind of like that with power cards. If everyone has a power card, then it sort of all balances out, and it's pretty good. But Vortex says, I personally don't really play that much of any sort of alternative formats, but I do F with Toss format. And Toss format is a format that I want to try out at some point. I think it'll be very fun to get into. I know that a lot of people trying out retro Yu-Gi-Oh! Or like making retro Yu-Gi-Oh! Content, you might assume, they're kind of a Yu-Gi boomer who's just like, oh, I don't like any of the sort of modern game or anything like that. I'm just someone who likes the game as a whole. And part of the reason why I do retro formats is because I think the game has changed a lot over time, and that's not a bad thing. But having access to the older formats means that if you like the early versions of the game, you have that. And then also if you like later versions of the game, you can have those as well. And I sort of want to see all the different versions of the game that there are and sort of just catalog them on the channel, introduce people to them in the future, and just have fun with them. So, yeah. But Uriah has 0 under his control. Yep, that is indeed something that I missed, Yu-Gi-Oh! Commander. So that is indeed why you didn't attack. So, yeah, unfortunately, I did not catch that. But Dump Truck did. And, I mean, you might attack either way, just in case your opponent, like, baits out like, Spell and Trap. Or not Spell and Trap removal. It baits out, like, attack removal, or, like, your opponent thinks that it has more attack than it does. But, yeah. I don't think it really mattered there either way. Because I trust that Yami Chaotico knows enough about their own deck to not worry about the Uriah attacking in there. But yeah, that's a quick one there. The sad thing about Uriah is that it is very side deckable against. So we saw that there with Dump Truck bringing in the Decree. So Decrees, Jinzos, things like that, they really do hurt the deck quite a bit. Has the first match wrapped up? Okay, it looks like Sentenza won against Wagmuffin, so Sentenza and PJ are going at it. So actually, I'm going to dive into that one because we haven't seen PJ's deck yet. So I figure we can dive into that, see how that's going. There we go, PJ versus Sentenza. And yeah, Vortex says, I personally miss the old tins before 2020. I love the tins with one or more promo cards and main series boosters. That's, for example, how I got my hands on some Ancient Prophecies first edition packs. I will say, back in the day, back as a kid, when like the new tins would come out and you'd have like the shiny card that you were like, oh boy, that's such a rare card. I need to get my hands on that. And you'd get the tin, get the card out, and then open some packs on top of it. It was just so good as a kid. I don't know. It just hit. Even if it was a card like Total Defense Shogun or something, where it's like, that card's not really that good. It was just so hyped getting the tin, getting that card, be like, oh, look at this cool Total Defense Shogun. I can attack in defense position with this thing. And then getting some packs on top of that. It was just such a good time. Yeah, so I really like those tins as well. I think that, like, people go back and forth on whether you call retro formats alternative formats or not. I think it really can depend. MST coming for the level limit there, so that's going to be a bit scary for PJ because they could be in a pretty bad spot. Balter attacking over the set to prevent it from getting the effect off. And then this won't quite be lethal damage, but it will be very, very close. So it's not looking good for PJ. I understand why they used the secret barrel there, but maybe it would have been good to hold it just to sort of bluff that it's something else. But yeah, this is not going to be the best here for PJ. Unless they get another stall card here, which they might get. But any normal spell that they activate can be negated by Balter. So it's a bit tricky there. So yeah, Balter is a house, both in this format and in other formats. So looks like Sentenza's in a pretty good spot. And yeah, that'll just be the end of game one. So it seems like PJ is on some burn shenanigans. And, you know, people do play that sort of thing. Again, as I mentioned, Stallburn has had some success in the past. So it is a deck that you'll run into if you play this format. But it'll be interesting to see how it does in this locals here. Because a lot of the times it also suffers against side decking, right? People have a lot of side deck hate for that sort of deck. Rhoda here coming down. Rhoda's going to get a search of a warrior here. Going for a Dawn Zalug, drip a card from the hand. Vortex asks, what was the worst supported attribute in the DM era? Wind or fire is my guess. If we're talking about the DM era specifically, so like before the cards from Elemental Energy, like the spiritual arts, then it's a bit tricky. I would probably say fire just because it didn't really have any like archetype based around it at all. You could argue that wind has harpies. So like, you know, you have something there maybe. But fire didn't really get like anything, until maybe like Destalos, I guess. Yeah, you could even argue like Nephthys, because I think Nephthys is a fire. But the issue with Nephthys is that you make it with Hand of Nephthys, which is a wind. So you want to be using like Flying Kamikiri and things like that to get into it. So it's more like a wind deck than a fire deck. So yeah, I'd say fire probably. Which is a shame because I like fire, but it's just not quite there. Although I'm trying to think now, when did Structure Deck 3 come out? I think that was the fire one. Because you could argue that that was like okay for fire, the Ultimate Baseball Kid. There are some interesting things you could do with fire potentially, but just wind has a bit more support. That's just my opinion though. Oh, Clown Format's another one that I want to get to, Squish. Yeah, BA, Shaddoll, Clown Blade, Cosmo, Necros, a lot of cool decks that, you know, I was sort of like away from the game during the Arc V era. And it's a shame because a lot of the Arc V archetypes that I look at, I'm like, damn, this is a cool archetype. I like the flavor of this. I like how it combines the different game mechanics to do an interesting thing. So, you know, yeah, I like Arc V a lot, just flavor wise, and both. Like, I also like that it sort of tried to make all the different sewing mechanics like on the same sort of level of power. And you could argue that it didn't necessarily succeed in that, but like, I think it's just kind of cool that they were attempting that. Just trying to draw the game a little bit more together instead of just being like, oh, look, Xyz monsters come out. You don't have to play with synchros anymore, even though I know that's not quite how it happened in the Zexal era, at least at the start of it. But eventually, by the end of it, it kind of was how it was. So it'd be nice just to see that time period, see fusions get some more support, see all that stuff. So, yeah, like, I'm not sure I'd call Fire Princess deck like a fire deck. It's just a deck playing a fire monster. So, it's a bit tricky there. That Dawn just doing so much work here. Little Miss bringing it back to rip into Jim Bob's hand a bit here. And Jim Bob is in a tough spot. They're in top deck mode. Turtle is a decent one. Turtle's going to attack in. Now, the question here, does Little Miss mill here if they want to? I would say, yeah, I would say mill just to try and hit the zombie targets, because you hit, like, maybe they're only playing one Koki. You hit the one Koki and then they're in a tough spot. But it looks like they did not hit that. So they're going to bring up Vampire Lord here, not Koki. Interesting choice. They might have sided out the Kokis, although I don't know why you would if you're up against Warriors. Maybe they're just doing this because they're afraid of removal. But this can lose to like Cyber Dragon. Now the question is, does Warriors play Cyber Dragon, especially in a post-siding sort of scenario? Unclear. But it can potentially fall prey to that. So that is something to consider here. But they're going to mill a spell, or not mill, but send a spell from deck to grave. And so the one they're going to choose is a knock. Makes sense because knock doesn't really, have much use against this deck and stop pyramid turtles. But in this game state, Jim Bob's not going to be setting those monsters right now. So Sidra does come out. That is sort of the punish, but they've got a bottomless. So that explains why they went for the Vampire Lord instead of the Koki. Question is, does Little Mist have another Sidra in hand? And that could be a bit rough there if they do. But it looks like they do not. They're just going to set one pass back. And now Vampire Lord can really shine because Vampire Lord can just attack in. You don't really have to worry about that back row. Dim Priz is not in this format yet. So it would be a thing to destroy the Vampire Lord if it stops it. And yeah, it looks like Jim Bob is going to call a spell again. I mean, that makes sense, right? Spells, if you get to actually the point where Little Mist only has good spells in deck, you don't necessarily want them drawing them. So I can understand why they'd call spells. This is sort of like the annoying part about Vampire Lord. Vampire Lord, not the best card overall, in my opinion. It's sort of been that way throughout the game's history, where like even on release, it wasn't really the best because it released in a format with 3 DD Warrior Ladies, which like kind of invalidated it right out of the gate. But the bad thing about this as well is that like the effect that it has to send a card type from your opponent's deck to the graveyard, it generally just benefits your opponent. They just send things that they don't want to draw at a given point. And so it's very hard to get actual like value out of it there. They're going to flip up the set just to get a peek at it with that sort of light there because they probably want to activate that either way. They're pretty low on life. And so they want to protect against things like Sidra, for instance, that might come down and beat over the Lord. So you probably do this either way and figure like, okay, with this Lord on field, I can sort of just kill them over the course of 3 turns. So it's probably good here. But yeah, it's a pretty good situation for Jim Bob here. Probably just going to do spell again, I assume. But we'll have to see. I mean, they could switch it up here, but I feel like spell is probably a good choice. Squish says, I've also been testing in GOAT, and I think I found a pretty good deck. I call it Chaos OTK, killing people by banishing with Soul Release and Chaos Monsters, and activating Dimension Fusion. There have been a couple decks like that in the past. It's always very cool to see people doing stuff with that. I mean, there's been Fusion Gate sort of versions of that with Dimension Fusion and things like that. So, yeah, it looks like they've gotten to the point where there are only really good spells left in the deck. So Dark Hole getting sent by Little Mist there. It doesn't do anything about the Vampire Lord there. Smashing Ground is coming down just to do it. But unfortunately, that Vampire Lord will come back in Jim Bob's standby phase. So this could potentially play into like a Bottomless, which is probably why they did it. Yep, there's the Bottomless. So Bottomless will clear it if that back row does not protect it. If it's a Solemn in the back row, you might want to do it for that. So yeah, you can do this. This is a summon. A special summon this card from the graveyard. So yeah, it is special summon this card from the graveyard. So also Vampire Lord doesn't protect itself against cards that destroy. It just comes back the following turn. So you can definitely do this. Like there's nothing on the card preventing you from getting Bottomless, which is another way in which Vampire Lord is a bit tough. Yeah, I mean, I can just send something to them saying, yeah, yeah, you can Bottomless Lord. Yeah, it's a summon. You can also Bottomless Stardust, I believe. Stardust is also a summon. It's just you wouldn't Bottomless the Stardust because it would just come back, right? So like, you don't need to do that. But yeah, you can Bottomless Lord. It's not just return to field. It says special summon this card from the grave. So yeah. I'm pretty sure about Stardust that you can do it there. Because it is a summon. There's nothing that would say that you wouldn't be able to respond to a summon. It's just you've never bottomless of Stardust. Drill Warrior is a bit different though, because Drill Warrior like returns to field. It doesn't. I don't think it summons to field when it comes back. So that one's a bit tricky. But won't worry about Drill Warrior for a couple of formats. So we'll be diving into that when we dive into it. But I'm looking forward to that because I think that that deck is very cool. Quick Draw Dandy Warrior, but can't really do much with it before Quick Draw comes out. So. Also, Drill Warrior isn't even out yet until that. You do have Turbo Warrior and Junk Warrior and Nitro Warrior. Those are the 3 Synchron Warriors you have out at that point. But, not really much you can do with that. This game's very intense. Very, very intense. Just a Sangan and a Dream on Jim Bob's side. Setting that, interesting to get a search here. So they're not playing into another bottomless. I feel like you don't have to worry about bottomless here necessarily because I figure if they had a bottomless, they would have probably done that earlier. Note that they activated Smashing Ground, then set a card, and that card was bottomless. And so I figure that they don't have one. But I think this is ultimately okay, just playing it slow. You might run into like a back row, like a Sakuretsu or something, if you just summon out like a, Koki or something. So I think this makes sense overall. Yeah, no need to really rush this and lose the game from a winnable position. But yeah, this is an intense one. This is a very intense one. I'll have to see what happens. Big think on Luna's part as well. So they're thinking back and forth, but that is sort of like what the best games of Reaper get you. That's why the format, was able to have a following in the first place. Like, I know it sort of got enveloped by all the Stein stuff, but the reason why people liked it in the first place was not the Stein stuff. They liked it because you would wind up in these really grindy game states, and I think that the grindy game states are still there if you get games like this, but unfortunately it's not quite rough. Yes, there is Ignition Priority in this format, Yami Chaotico. That is around until like Dino Rabbit in the Zexal era. Speaking of the Zexal era, Squish says, I think in Renew format, there is a concept of Fabled Dark Worlds using the Fabled cards as tuner with Dark Worlds. That'd be cool to see. Fableds do benefit upon being sent from hand to grave, and a lot of the Dark Worlds cards do discard, right? And also, they're Fiends, I think, for the most part, so that does pair with the like Gates of Dark World and things like that. So I could definitely see that being a fun thing to do in Renew format. So Renew, very cool format. I'm glad that they're sort of getting traction. I know that it does have its naysayers, like some people are concerned about Dark World and how good that deck is, but I'm optimistic. I hope it will be a format that people are able to, play and have fun with. So, yeah. Rip Chaotic, we got robbed for, I guess there was something that came up where they thought that there wasn't an Ignition Priority maybe, but yeah, there is indeed Ignition Effect Priority. You can indeed just prio something there. And yeah. Can't TT and damage step. So very, very sort of clever way to do this sort of thing on Jim Bob's part. And that Death Shoot never live. So yeah, Loomis did save the TT, which I think was smart, but unfortunately they were not able to sort of get things together there and win. So yeah, very, very intense games. And yeah, very, very cool. Damn, good games indeed. Okay. Activated Uriah and got torrentialed. Well, you can activate Uriah. Does Uriah prevent anything from responding to it, or just the card it targeted? I think it might be anything. So yeah, if you activate Uriah, you can't respond to Uriah. So yeah, that would have been an issue there. Let me just double check that. Uriah says, yeah, neither player can activate spell or trap cards in general. So yeah, they would not have been able to respond to that. So, yeah, it's unfortunate there. That does happen though. Occasionally, sort of misrulings can happen, I guess. And not really a misruling because there wasn't a ruling given for that, but just playing the game and not realizing a rule happens. And yeah, so that's unfortunate, but it is just nature of playing on a manual simulator like this. So it is a bit tricky. But yeah, I mean, it's something to think about for the next time. So yeah. Anyways, Dump Truck is going to be facing off against Jim Bob here. And I think PJ and Sentenza wrapped up, or did it wrap up? Might still be going. So let me double check that. Okay, it looks like PJ and Centenza is still going. So actually, let's dive into that one because that one will probably be wrapping up soon. So we should probably just see how that's going here. If it is still going, there it is. PJ, nope, yeah, that one. There we go. PJ versus Centenza. So seems like PJ won game 2. And they got Germs on the field that represents 2,000, or not 2,000, 1,000 damage here. Make these two 500. And yeah, they're just kind of annoying to eat through. Centenza only has 3,500 life points left. But they do have Mobius out to deal with the back row. You know, they Dust Tornadoed that Gravity Bind there. They're going to smashing around one of the Germs to prevent the 500 damage because every bit of damage can help. And they got Xarian Universe to pierce. Oh, that is brutal there. Yeah, Xarian Universe, definitely a powerful card. It also sees play in Cyber format, which is, it's a very cool card in Cyber format, in my opinion. I like it a lot whenever it comes up. And so I like it here too. This was a tin card as well. And a tin card that's deceptively powerful because I think, like, when you first look at it, you're like, oh, you know, what's the big deal? You know, it's not the craziest card in the world, but when you think about it, it actually is pretty good. It's a beater, level 4, 99 defense, also walls off a lot if you need it to. Piercing battle damage can also really help as well against certain decks. Like, it does a lot of different things, especially in GOAT format if it was around there, because, you know, you run over GOAT tokens and things like that. PJ bringing out a Morphing Jar in attack mode to deal that 700 damage there, just poking in because they're like, Centenza is low enough that I can actually do this. However, that will open themselves up to taking a little bit more damage here. Warrior Lady attacking in over the Morphing Jar. Is there going to be a Book of Moon? There isn't going to be a Book of Moon, so that explains why they did this. I think this makes a lot of sense. The Morphing Jar getting flipped up, and it looks like that will be fine. So no banish here, I assume. So yeah, both players will draw 5 and pitch the remaining cards from the hand. If I was Centenza, I might have actually set the Threatening Roar because I think you can have the read that PJ does have a Book of Moon in the back row. And if it's not a Book of Moon in the back row, then you're in a really good spot either way. So you don't really need to not set the Threatening Roar. But I think it's still fine. Like, you know, do you need Threatening Roar against this deck? Probably not. But it's just another card to have, I guess. So, I don't know. Maybe a minor misplay there. But I don't think it will matter in the end. They're going to set 2 and pass back. Okay, PJ's turn now. They have to deal with 2 back row and a Warrior Lady, but they probably have a little bit more burn cards in the hand here. So will this be good enough to get Centenza life points down, that last 2,300? Or will this not be good enough? So PJ's setting 1, setting 2, setting 3, setting 4, but a monster this time, and passing back to Centenza. I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm not surprised by this play. And it just depends on whether Centenza can eat through that back row enough, restrict getting flipped up right away to stop a Mobius from coming down and blowing up the remainder of that back row there. That can be pretty rough against Centenza here if they do have a Mobius in hand. Let's see the graveyard here. They've used up 1 Dust Tornado, so they still do have others potentially. They might have MSTs as well. So this means they can potentially deal with this sort of thing, but it does make it a little bit tougher to navigate here. So Centenza setting 1. I think Morphing Jar is limited in this format, so I don't think you have to worry about 2 of them. But they're going to attack into the set monster here. PJ thinking about that. They might not want to get that set monster banished here. So are they going to flip up something like a... Well, I think Gravity Bind... Is Gravity Bind semi'd or is it... No. Okay, Just Desserts is coming up now, so they're activating that Chain Link 1. Ojama Trio is probably coming Chain Link 2. And then if that monster has over 1,800 defense, or 1,800 exactly, then Centenza will lose the game here. So what is Centenza going to do now? Or maybe they didn't commit the Threatening Roar because of Secret Barrel. That would also make sense. But yeah, will this be fine? Centenza typing in the chat. It is on attack declaration. Yeah. They're thinking they might have something here. They might have Book of Moon. Book of Moon to set down their own Warrior Lady because they feel like they might be losing the game here. It looks like they are indeed going to do that. I think that makes a lot of sense here from Centenza because, you know, that monster might have enough defense to kill you here. And so you don't want to run into that. Squidge asks, which format will become the premier GX format, Reaper, GOAT, PC, or Trooper? I think GOAT already has that title. A lot of people view it as maybe not GX. I think it is GX, but a lot of people view it as DM, which I think is sort of erroneous. But yeah, I personally think that GOAT is sort of holding that title, but I think that you can have multiple formats around the same time that are still fun. I don't think the Reaper will ever become like a premier format because it sort of had its time in the sun and sort of left the spotlight. So I don't think it can ever really reclaim that. PC, I think, could definitely be a format that people flock to. I think it's a really skill intensive format. It's kind of like GOAT, where it has a deck PC, which is kind of like Chaos Turbo in GOAT format, where like, it's probably the best deck in the room, but other decks can beat it, so it's still fun. And then Trooper is, as Janjo says, welcome to the stream, Janjo. Trooper can be fun at times, and that's sort of like my opinion on Trooper. I feel like there's some very frustrating games that happen in Trooper, but there are also a lot of fun games that happen in Trooper. So really, whether Trooper does well or poorly just comes down to your tolerance for BS. And so that can make it a bit tricky to gauge how well it will do. Skill rating coming down here to stop the Warrior Lady from being able to banish whatever that set is, but there are no Giant Germs, so you don't need to worry about that. The Dark Mimic will be able to get a draw here, so that could potentially draw PJ into what they need, but Sentenza is sort of living on a prayer here with that 150 life points left. That can be a bit tricky here to deal with. MST on one of the back row. What will it be? Let's see. Dust Tornado, are they going to target the skill rain or are they going to target the restrict? They're going to target the restrict here. Makes sense. Like, skill rain stops monarchs, but like at least you can bring out a big guy, right? So I don't think that's the worst thing in the world. And it looks like PJ is going to set another activate level limit area B, and that's going to be quite unfortunate for Sentenza here if they don't have a way to deal with that. Yeah, they say G's because they're facing a lot of stuff. They're not quite the finals, Janjo. This is like semifinals. So if we look at the, here's the bracket right now. So this is this game, and then this will be there. Yeah. Switch says Trinity and GOAT and Machino DK and Trooper. Yeah, although I will say, the thing about the Trinity and GOAT is that, yes, that is tilting for people, but you could still win after being Trinity, or at least you have the sort of potential to win, right? Like there's the idea, oh, I haven't lost yet. Whereas if you get Machino DK'd, you're just dead, right? You can't win that game anymore because you lost in the process of that. So it does make it a little bit more frustrating, I think, than something like the Trinity and GOAT. But it is a bit tricky here. Meta is going to happen. Is that going to happen on a token? Is it going to happen on a set monster? It might happen on the set monster. They're going to tribute that. What are they going to bring out? Level 5 off meta. Maybe Fiend Skull to prevent targeted trap, but that doesn't even work with skill drain up. It's a bit tricky. Jan just said, and every deck can run training, not every deck is machine. That's also fair. Yeah, I can definitely see that sort of perspective as well. Going for the meta on the Balter and then activating a heavy here is a bit of an interesting ordering. I'm curious what they're doing. Oh, they wanted to get the Latent Dark Engrave for the Chaos Orc. But I still feel like you do this after... Oh, wait, the meta was set. Okay, so that's why you can't go for heavy first. So, makes sense. Makes sense to me. And now the question is, what is this Sork going to do? I would just banish one of my own tokens. And it looks like they are indeed going to do that. Oh, they got another Sork. Okay. Okay, now things are getting spicy here. I would still just banish one of my own tokens, honestly. Because you don't want to run into, like, a Dark Mimic and then give your opponent a draw. I would not have done this. I would not have done this at all. I think that's a grave mistake. I think that's potentially a game-losing mistake here. There's no possibility you win this turn, and you don't have defense to do other things. So, like, let's say they're running Panda. That would be the end of the game here. So, that was a risky play. I do not like that play. We'll have to see if it comes back to bite Sentenza here. You're giving your opponent 2 cards instead of 1. So, maybe that deck thinning does happen. But it looks like... interesting. They're going to go for another draw here, just trying to draw into that burn card that they need to potentially win the game. But they might draw it off that. Oh, no, it looks like they do not. So that will be the end of the game. Sentenza wins that match. Intense one in the end here. Luckily, they managed to dodge a real bullet at the final moment here. But as I always say, it's a lot different watching the games and also, playing the games. So while we're watching from like a detached sort of position outside of it, it can be easier for us to see potential misplays and things like that. But the token has 1,000 defense, so it will just wall off. So they wouldn't be able to kill the token, unfortunately. But that would be a potential way to get into lethal. And it looks like they didn't have any monsters that had above 1,000 attack in their deck, but less than 1,500. So yeah, they wouldn't be able to win that way either. But again, that's why it would have been a big risk for Sentenza, because if they did have a monster like that, they could have potentially just won the game attacking into a token. Or if they have Panda, they can just attack over anything on that board. So yeah, I feel like the move there was just to banish a token and force your opponent to have to do something on the following turn. But yeah, the stats do come up occasionally, so that can be a bit tricky there. But yeah, Nintendo was very lucky that PJ wasn't playing like Tomato, wasn't playing other things like that, because that would have been pretty rough there if they were. But yeah, it's always cool to see like when features of a card that you never expect to come up actually do come up. So like the tokens, as you say, the stats very rarely matter. But when they do matter, it actually is a big thing. And it's kind of neat to see that in action. It's one of my favorite parts about playing these games is when you wind up in this sort of edge scenario where like you'd never expect to be in the situation before, and then you actually wind up in that situation, and then it actually does matter. But Exiled Force coming down here to pop the Mobius to prevent just having a big guy on board, I guess. Looks like Jim Bob won game 1 here. Will they be able to win game 2 and face Sentenza in the finals, or will Dumptruck be able to claw their way back from this one? If I've learned one thing from watching these locals, never count Dumptruck out. Dumptruck is the king of the locals, basically, because he's won the most locals that we've had. Now, part of that is because, he plays in a lot of them, and not everyone plays in every one. But a big part of that is that he's just a very good player in these retro formats. So that will definitely help you a lot more than just repetition. And so he's very, very good here. Never count him out. As you can see here, he managed to win the game through there. So there we go. Dumptruck going in to the game 3 here against Jim Bob. Jim Bob also a very good player though, so you can't count him out either. Jim Bob's won a fair amount of these locals too, and he's just very, very good duelist on a whole. He's featured in a variety of my videos. So yeah, both these players very, very good. PJ says, well played, Sentenza. Yeah, well played both of you, honestly. Very, very close games, and down to the wire there. So that's pretty fun. I know a lot of people don't like playing against Burn or playing Burn. I do think it's interesting to have it in the game because it sort of just changes the way the game is played. So I think that decks that can turn the game on its head can be fun to face every now and again. Of course, people don't like that happening, and that's a very reasonable thing. Where like if they expect to play Yu-Gi-Oh the way they anticipate it being played, and they face something that forces them to not play Yu-Gi-Oh in that way, then that can also be very frustrating, which is why a lot of people don't like those decks. But I think it's sort of an interesting challenge to face them. But that's sort of another barrier for Reaper going forward, that Stall Burn has proven itself to be somewhat good in past tournaments. And a lot of people don't like playing against that deck. So, like, if you don't like playing against that deck, you're not really going to like the format as much, But that Comfy turn 1 is going to be very good here. Taking away the will to stop any potential combo. Looks like Dumptruck has Sidra, Exile, Dark Hole, and Zaborg. So, yeah, that will was going to be very good here. Even if you take out, like, the Sidra, they could go Exile, pop the set monster, and then will something else out. Even if you take the Exile, they could go Sidra into Zaborg, pop the monster, and then just kill you. So, yeah, looks like they're going to set a monster here, probably the new draw, because you wouldn't set Exiled here. And Sidra can't be set. You'd have to special summon it in defense. So, yeah, the new draw here is set. So, that's relatively good for Jim Bob because you know the exact hand now. But it's also a bit scary because you don't know what the set is. You also know that there's a Zaborg in hand. So if you let that set ride, they can just Zaborg you and, do stuff with that. But looks like they're going to attack. Oh my God. Treeborn Frog is brutal here. Now, this does kind of shut off the Sidra if Dumptruck so chooses. But if they ever wind up in a situation where they want the Sidra, they can always just prevent the Frog from coming back, So yeah, this is a brutal situation for Jim Bob to be in here. Dumptruck in a very, very good spot. They got Dark Hole, they got Sidra, they got Exiled, they got Frog, they got like so much stuff here. And Jim Bob is just going to set one, set another, and pass back. So trying to bait that Exiled maybe. Dushu coming down though. Dushu probably going to take, well, it depends on what the new draws are, but yeah, PJ says Burn can steal game 1, but have harder time once players side deck. And yeah, that is sort of the biggest issue with decks like that. And multiple decks in variety of formats have done decently enough with that game plan where you're like, basically you get a free game 1. And if you can manage to get the game 2 or 3, then you win the whole thing. So that's all you need. But it is definitely a tough thing to actually be like a meta deck, especially because once the thing becomes meta, if people respect it, they're going to have things to the main deck to stop it. And then it's like you have an uphill battle all 3 games. So that can be a bit tricky as well. It's why decks like that I don't ever think like are going to be like the best things in the metagame. Yes, Stallburn has won some events, but I think that's also partially because people don't necessarily know how to play it and also are not necessarily respecting it as much. So it can definitely make things a bit tricky here, but Shepard are going to activate here. And it seems like Dumbtrick's going to get out an Exiled and a Tomato. Jim Bob going to get out a Mystic Swordsman level 2 and an Injection Fairy Lily. I feel like Jim Bob's going to set both, right? And yeah, the Exile is probably going to be used on the Lily no matter what. So you got to set Lily against Tomato. And also if you set both, you know, they still can't get over Lily this turn. So they got to do that in main phase 2. But yeah, it's definitely not ideal for Jim Bob. They do have Rhoda. They have Dust Shoot. They have Dark Hole. But Dumber can try and play around the Dust Shoot a little bit better here. But I'm not sure they actually can entirely. Yeah, so it makes it a bit tricky here. Yeah, Jim Bob setting both. Makes sense. And yeah. PJ also mentioned that Aratos recently won Chimera Tech with CO Burn. CO Burn, another deck that is sort of in that category. So it's an interesting sort of thing there. Squish says, I wish people would do tournaments where they take a certain format like Edison, make formats like Dark and Light only, no banlist, only Dragons, and no Synchros. I think that Edison will reach that point sometime soon. I don't think it's quite there because people still are experimenting with different lists in Edison, still seeing how the format evolves. But I think once Edison reaches the sort of level of exploration that like GOAT formats had, I think those sort of tournaments will happen. Because you look at how GOAT has evolved over time, and GOAT does a lot of those sorts of formats now. It's fun to do, and GOAT format, while it is still great, a lot of what draws people to a new retro format is the sort of exploration aspect, and GOAT has lost a lot of that. It's very hard to do like new exploration work in GOAT format now, but yeah, as JJ said, Dark and Light only and no synchros, it kind of is GOAT, and yeah, I can see that. I mean, Earth Aggro's around, but like that's basically what most decks are: Dark and Light only, and no synchros. No deck has synchros, but yeah, PJ says Sidejar being legal is very good for burn decks. That's very true. Sidejar and Morphing Jar are both very good for that style of deck. But there goes the Rhoda here. Rhoda searching out a warrior from the deck. We know that the Dust Shoot could potentially rip a card out of the hand. We also know that there is a Raigeki Break set. Now the question is, will Jump Truck save the Raigeki Break for the Dust Shoot, or are they going to use it on something like the Lady here? Bit tricky to say. And they are thinking about it. They are thinking about it. I mean, yes, GOAT still has exploration, but like, I think that part of what makes those new decks that have popped up good is more the players and not necessarily the decks themselves. And that's the thing. Like, you can sort of top or win an event with a lot of different decks in GOAT format, in any format, really. But the issue then becomes, like, when we talk about, like, a meta deck or a deck that, like, you know, it's very good in the format, we're generally talking about decks that, you know, if a bunch of people bring it to a tournament, a bunch of people are going to top, right? Like, it's more about conversion rate, right? And if you get a lot of people playing a deck, what's the conversion rate going to be? And if the conversion rate is going to be pretty small, even after a lot of, you know, testing and playing and all that stuff, then the deck is not necessarily going to be a top tier contender, in my opinion. Again, it's still very cool that those decks exist. And this is why, like, you know, people say, oh, GOAT's tier 1 or tier 0. It's not tier 0. Decks can win against Chaos Turbo, especially if they prepare for them and prepare for the playstyle, prepare for the decks themselves, things like that. But it does mean that, like, you know, even if those decks pop up, they're not necessarily going to be as good as something like Chaos Turbo or something like that. And they're not going to necessarily see consistent tournament success. So, but, you know, that could always change. You know, maybe in the future, people realize that those decks actually are, like, on the level of Chaos Turbo and things like that. But Element of Surprise and also metagaming against Chaos Turbo means that those decks do have an edge against Chaos Turbo a lot of the time. So, Light Swarm, Black Beam beat, Hero beat Glads and Fairy, for, I guess, no Synchro, I would guess. But, yeah, all those decks could be pretty good under no Synchro lists. But, yeah, Zaborg going to be quite annoying here for Jim Bob. And that's part of the problem with Monarchs is that, like, once they get the resource engine up, it can just be very annoying to deal with. You know, Treeborn Frog is just such a good card, giving you value basically every turn. It's just so tough for Jim Bob to actually come back from this here. Yeah. I don't know. It's a tricky one. Jim Bob said another passing back. I don't know. I'm pretty sure there's still another exile in hand as well. So Dumbdruck can also use that other exile to increase the pressure even more on Jim Bob here. Zaborg attacking in for 24. That will indeed go through. Bring Jim Bob down to 800. And now Mobius. Oh, no. Oh, no. That is brutal. Hitting Creed Swap and Threatening Roar. Taking that Threatening Roar out of the picture here. Honestly, I might have used Threatening Roar that turn if I was Jim Bob, just because, like, ugh, it's just so rough going down to 800. But yeah, nothing they could really do there. So that's going to be the end of that game. And we're going to be getting the finals between Dumbtruck and Sentenza here. Yeah, Treeborn Frog at 3 is very frustrating in the format. I will say a lot of decks don't play all 3 copies. But it's just very, very good. So you have access to a lot more of the time than you do otherwise. But yeah, it's definitely a rough game. But yeah, Monarchs being, you know, very much more enabled is obviously, like, not ideal for other decks in the format. You know, Monarchs are very, very good. So we're on to the finals here. Let's see how it goes. Yeah. I'm just sort of looking at the comments in the Discord chat as well. If you want to play in these locals, by the way, head over to the YGO from Zero Discord server. We have them every week, generally on the weekend. Last week we had them on Monday because, you know, Easter Sunday, so that was kind of tough for some people. But yeah, we generally have these on like Sunday or Saturday or something like that. So are we ending the stream after finals? I was planning on ending the stream after finals unless people have other ideas for what they want to see on the stream. But yeah, 95 Clemmy says a pre-Shadow Infinity format would be interesting. You know, Treeborn Frog for Monarchs. That definitely would be interesting. I feel like that'd be too similar to Cyber format, but maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe that would be its own sort of thing. So I think that actually people in the Reaper Discord server did experiment with that. I think they called it like Elemental Energy Reaper, and they had like a channel for that, but never really caught on as much. I don't think it was like that interesting. Like it was kind of weird, but and let me try and pull up that channel again. Let me see how much activity there was. It might have been archived in the Reaper Discord server as well. I don't quite know. But yeah, people definitely tried it out. It also might have been a thread somewhere. I don't quite see it right now. But yeah, it was cool. People were experimenting with all sorts of things when it came to Reaper, especially when people realized that like Sign was a major problem, and they obviously wanted the format to survive, so they were trying out all these different things. So yeah, but yeah, I'm trying to find that thread. Alt Reaper, that's what it was called. It was called Alt Reaper. Yeah, I'm trying to think about like what conclusions they came down to. Unless Alt Reaper is the alternate, if they're trying to do an alt format. I don't know. There was a lot of stuff going on the Reaper server back in the day. It was a great time to get into it. I mean, that's what got me into playing Retro Yu-Gi-Oh! Online. So I will always be grateful for Reaper format. But yeah, I don't think they necessarily got the format they were looking for by restricting it to just elemental energy. Yeah, but it definitely would be distinctive from Cyber. That is true. Because it is a different list, so that does change things a lot. But I think it turned out that like the inclusion of Treeborn Frog, like, you know, while very good for Monarchs, it didn't necessarily stop Monarchs from being a really good deck if Treeborn Frog is not there, right? So I think that was the conclusion. I could be wrong about that. If people remember that thread and remember the discussions and experimentation going on there, let me know. But I'm pretty sure that's how it turned out. So Dumbtrick is hosting for Sentenza. I don't think Sentenza is in just yet. They might be. It looks like they were taking a 5-minute sort of break, which makes sense. They've had some intense sort of things there, duels that is, and they might be using like the bathroom or something like that. But yeah, Reaper format definitely did have a lot of ban list changes. So Yeah, Cyber is a lot more similar to Goat, and then Reaper is sort of its own thing. But yeah, I think Reaper format and the sort of elemental energy restricted format in terms of like what you're talking about there, I think it turned out it was like relatively the same. Even though you know Monarchs are a bit less consistent, they're still sort of a threat and still a very rough deck. But I could be misremembering. I could be misremembering that from what people played there. But I think Format Library used to categorize Reaper as before Shadow of Infinity. I could be wrong about that. But yeah, I'm not quite sure. But yeah, Jando says, Cyber technically is a GOAT format in the sense that they follow the same list, which is very true. In fact, back when they were deciding like where to actually draw the line for GOAT format, SGC Boston, which was the format that Cyber format is based around, was floated out. But ultimately, people decided to not have it because they didn't like Cyber Dragon being the format. It's Cyber Dragon is sort of a transitional card in Yu-Gi-Oh's history where it sort of accelerates the pace of play a lot more. And so people didn't necessarily like that as much. So they settled on SGC Indianapolis of that year. But yeah. Cyber format historically is like a month long. Yes, but like generally when people are basing formats around stuff, they base around events, right? So that's why GOAT is SGC Indianapolis. And Cyber format is SGC Boston, because you base it around a single event, so that way you can unify like, okay, this is the exact card pool, this is the exact rulings, this is the exact yada yada yada, right? That's why Edison format is kind of unique, because Edison format has some tournament specific rulings that they follow that make it a little bit different. If you just wanted to call Edison format like a period of time, right, you wouldn't quite be able to do that. So yeah, so that's generally why we base it around events instead of just time periods. But yeah, it's all very interesting stuff, like in terms of how we build communities around these formats. And I do think it's just sort of been tried and true that like basing it around a single event makes it a lot easier to sort of coalesce people around it, because there's less confusion about what's in the card pool, what rulings you go by, things like that. So that's another reason why people sort of take that approach. And that's why, like, I took that approach when, obviously, there are some limitations in the DM era. You can't really do that in the early DM era. Like, there weren't SGCs going on, so you just kind of have to base it around the card pool in some weird way. But, like, once you actually started getting regular events, we sort of based it around the events themselves. And as Jando says, Edison's named after said event. Scarcely does that happen. I think there's a couple reasons why that makes sense for Edison. One, Edison, it sort of conjures up an inventive spirit, because Thomas Edison invented the light bulb and some other stuff. Was a terrible person, which is a fun thing to look into historically. But Edison's just a catchy name. People generally know it from the historical figure, so it's not quite as crazy as or not crazy, but not quite as generic as something like Indianapolis. And it's just like, okay, Indianapolis, but what about Indianapolis, right? You can sort of interpret the word Edison in different ways. Another thing too is that if you have something like Indianapolis format, right, there are many, many SJC Indianapolises. I think there weren't as many SJC Edisons. I don't know how many SJC Edisons there were, but I don't think it's as big of a hub for SJCs as Edison was. The game vanished. That might have just been Dumpster taking it down while they wait for Sentenza here. But yeah, it is kind of interesting that it does turn out that way, and people still like it. There are pros and cons to naming it after an event or naming it after, whatever deck is in the format or something else entirely. Because also, like, if you look at like Warrior format, right? Warrior format, a lot of people don't necessarily try it out because they feel like it's just going to be Warrior decks running around, and not everyone likes the Warrior deck game plan, and they don't like Warrior mirrors either. But that's not really what Warrior format is. Warrior format's a lot more of a diverse format. Warrior is still a good deck in the format, but it's not necessarily tier 0, right? It's definitely not tier 0, actually. So, naming it not after the event itself can also alienate people. So it's sort of a balance. And I think like different formats sort of strike that balance in different ways. I think GOAT is a great example. GOAT, of course, refers to the deck, but also it refers to greatest of all time. So if you're calling a format the GOAT, it makes sense why it would sort of catch people with it, right? Even if you're not thinking about the deck itself. I think that I think maybe part of the reason why Tengu is not caught on as much is because it's named Tengu, which doesn't really have those other connotations, right? Same with Hat, really. Like, Hat doesn't really have those other connotations. You just think of Hat the deck, right? Or just a hat that you wear on your head, which is like, it's not really the most catchy thing. I think part of the reason why Redo could potentially do somewhat well compared to some of the other formats is because Redo actually has a catchy name that hits on multiple points, right? Return of the Duelist is the set that it's based on. That set name is Redo. Redo as in like doing a redo of something. So it has that punniness there. And so I feel like it could potentially catch on because I think name branding is very important. So, but yeah. And as PJ said, there will always be disagreements on these names. I mean, we're currently seeing that with Redo format and Wind Up format, right? Like, Format Library still calls it Wind Up format. And, the people who are trying to push it on like YouTube and stuff like that, they call it Redo format. And so I don't think there's like vehement disagreements there. Like, I don't think they're like at each other's throats over it, but it is just sort of a difference in approach to marketing the format. Oh, they did start. Okay, cool. Let's dive into that. I got so caught up in the discussion. I didn't see that. Thank you, 95 Clemmy. But yeah. Jacob says traditional date names are the best if uninspired. I disagree with that. I think that traditional date names are not really good because if you're trying to think about a variety of different formats, it's a lot easier to remember a word name as opposed to a number name. Like, I'm not going to remember like 0306 as much as I would Reaper, right? Especially if there's 0307 or something as well. It just doesn't quite ring with like, oh, I know what's in that format. It just rings with like, okay, it's that time, but what's going on at that time specifically, right? PJ also brings up a good point where part of the argument for Wind Up or against Wind Up is that it is a negative association for some players, which is very true. Some people think of Wind Up as the Wind Up hand loop deck, and well, you can't really do that in Wind Up format. Naming a Wind Up format, people are going to think, oh, that's just the format where Wind Up hand loops you for 1 billion and you can't play. So yeah, it's definitely, I personally lean towards Redo. When I reach that format on the channel, hopefully the naming sort of division will be sorted out and I don't have to actually pick a side. That Breaker/Scientist format was a thing that happened on the channel where some people called it Breaker format, some people called it Scientist format, and it just kind of led to a mess in terms of just like me choosing a name for it. And then so I'd prefer to not have a repeat of that in the future, but yeah. I mean, yeah, so Jando says, easy to remember, but not for pinning down a period of time, like library indexing, not saying that I'd follow it. Yeah, and I mean, if you are, like, technically, like, pinning down points in time, right? Like, if you're just saying, okay, I want this in my list just to have it here so I know the exact event that it's based on, like, sure, you can do that, but, like, I think that if you're doing that and you have to like look up like, okay, it was this event, then like what are the cards in that event and stuff. And then you have to look up the sort of format itself anyways. It like, yes, it can be like more like quote unquote scientific, but like I don't necessarily think that level is needed for sorting out these formats, right? I think in that case you just like do like just naming after the event itself, not necessarily after the date. Because I think naming after the event itself sort of cuts closer to what the format actually is, as opposed to like a month in a year where like, okay, now I need to look up the event in that month, right? So, but yeah, I'm also happy that some of the formats names caught on that you named out, like Imperial format, that's doing very well, and I think that's a great name for it. So I'm happy that they're still holding events. They're actually holding an Imperial event sometime soon, so that should be fun. I'm curious to see what people bring to that. I think that format is sort of in the period of the DM era where like a lot of times the decks are very samey, but they're not necessarily a bad thing, especially when you have other formats that are more diverse that you can also play in addition to them. So it's just nice to dip your toes into it sometimes, and I think Imperial's a fun one. I personally prefer the formats that are like sort of directly around it. Like I'd prefer Treasure format if I want that style of gameplay. But if I want to play around with like Jinzo and stuff, I'd rather just play with Android format. But that's just me personally, and I'm glad that people do enjoy Imperial and are playing it and having fun with it, so that's pretty good. Yeah, so PJ clarified it's April 30th, so definitely keep an eye out for that if you want to play an Imperial format. Imperial format's a fun one. I think it's pretty good. People have their complaints about that format. People have complaints about every format. Every format has good things and bad things about it, so just balancing them out and seeing what you can tolerate, right? And so if you've never played Imperial format, I think it's a fun one to try out. So definitely, head on over to the Discord server and head over to the Imperial Discord server after that. Switch said, do a blind 5Ds tier list after. What do you mean by blind 5Ds? Is that like anticipating what sort of just sort of anticipating the quality of the formats? I'd be down to do that. That would be fun. Yeah, just a blind 5Ds tier list, just being like, okay, I think that this format will be like this and this format will be like this. That would be cool. Yeah, I'll do that. So that's what I'll do after the locals wraps up. So that'll be fun. Thanks for the suggestion, Squish. I may actually make that into a video as well, so that would be cool. But I'd have to see if there's already a 5Ds format tier list out. So yeah. Jano said Lightsworn format is fun and should see more play. I've also heard that, so I'm excited to reach Lightsworn format. I've heard it's like a sort of alternate version of Edison, kind of like how Warrior format's sort of an alternate version of Goat format, so that's kind of cool as well. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Threatening Roar here to stop the Balter from hitting into the set monster, so that is a monster that they want the effect to resolve, it looks like. Yeah. No, it's start of the battle phase. Yeah, I mean, you know what's attacking here. It's just the Balter, right? Like, so it doesn't really matter there. But, ooh, crazy version of Edison. Okay, I like that descriptor. I like things when they're crazy. Wild and crazy. You can activate Threatening Roar at the beginning of the... You can activate Threatening Roar at the beginning of the battle phase. I'm pretty sure. I could be wrong about that. Maybe I'm wrong about it. Either way, like, Threatening Roar is happening here, so. I think they've already normal summoned. I don't think this necessarily matters as much, because basically this would just go to main 2. I think you can use it in battle phase. Like, will this matter? Like, I don't know. I always thought that you could do it start step of battle phase. But, yeah, it feels like semantics. Like, I'll ask. Not there. This is mad. Like, I don't think it. Like, it's just like, either way, like, if you can't activate the start of the battle phase, they would have, like, activated end of main phase. So, like, it. I'm pretty sure you can. Like, either way, it's like, it doesn't really matter here. Like, I think it, again, like, if you, and this gets into a sort of thing where, like, a lot of the times in, like, judge ruling and stuff, and this is part of why I'm not a judge, is because, like, if I give a ruling where it's like, oh, you can't activate Threatening Roar in battle phase, and they went to battle phase, so technically you can't really use Threatening Roar here, or, like, you activate Threatening Roar in response to the attack, and so, like, you know, then the attack won't go through. But, like, then it's like you force Intensa not to use the card, and then it's like it is kind of weird. But I mean, let me look up battle phase steps in Yu-Gi-Oh, because I think there's a start step. There's a start step of battle phase, right? In the start step of battle phase, so start step. Let's see. Enter the battle phase. So you enter the battle phase. Let's see. Start step. Let's see what that happens. Yeah, you didn't declare on a main. You just went to battle. So, like, that's a bit tricky. Turn player declares that she or she is now entering battle phase. Fast effects and appropriate trigger effects. Yeah, it's definitely, so basically, yeah, the start step is not where the attack declaration happens. That's when the battle step. Yeah, battle step. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. They can activate and start step here. Yep. Yeah, Balter's always cool when it comes down. So I always like seeing Balter, yeah. But it's also player etiquette. It's like if you go into the battle phase, like I mean, it's like, yeah, if you just go battle phase on Dueling Book without announcing it, it's like if they activate Threatening Roar and it's like start of battle phase, then it's a bit tricky. But yeah, start step works. That's probably thought it works. I thought you could activate Threatening Roar and start step. But like battle phase is cool. So, or not cool, it's complicated. So it's kind of tough to know sometimes. But yeah, start step, it's not when declaration happens, when quick effects can activate. So while Dunfric does have priority to activate a quick effect in the start step, if they pass the priority to do that, then Centenza will be able to activate a quick effect of their own in start step. So wasn't Roar worded differently back then? I mean, slightly, but I don't think it was worded differently in a way that would prevent it from being able to activate in the start step, right? I don't necessarily think Threatening Roar has like a simple enough effect that I don't necessarily know if it was worded like drastically differently. If I go to errata here, the original effect was your opponent cannot declare an attack during this turn, and the errata effect is your opponent cannot declare an attack this turn. So just removed a during, so that doesn't necessarily affect how the card would work. But yeah, it's not the Woboku situation, as Janjo says, where Woboku, like, when it first came out, people thought it meant, like, stopping effect damage as well and stuff like that. Yeah. Book of Moon, targeting Balter. Balter can be targeted by this. It is a quick play spell, not a normal spell. So, Switch is hot take, but I think the TOS format, since there is no definitive way to play the format and is really inactive right now, a format library using YCS Pasadena and the website using YCS Portland. And honestly, TOS format is another sort of format that offers a lesson to people trying to build a format of their own, where if you have confusion over the date of a given format and the event that it's based around, then that's where you start to get into issues, right? People can generally figure out like, okay, TOS format is this time period, but they don't have the exact event, and that makes the different versions of TOS different, right? And that is detrimental to people wanting to get into TOS, because let's say you join a TOS community, you have to be like, okay, which version of TOS are you playing, you know? And then you have to learn that version, and then let's say you're going to your local locals, and you're like, hey, people want to play TOS, and they're like, sure, I've got a TOS deck here, and the TOS deck turns out to be a deck for a different event in the TOS time period, then that's its own thing. So like that makes it kind of tough, and that's sort of another lesson. You can't really necessarily have that. Tengu Plant used to have that with like Dark Arm, or not Dark Arm Dragon, with Dark Worlds being legal or not legal, and that being confusing there. So like, it's very tricky to actually, you know, sort of litigate this stuff and figure out when you're actually playing the flag with a given format. So that's why it's always important to be very clear with that. Hat format has also had sort of difficulties with that in the past, where there's like high hat and low hat and people sort of drawing those lines there. It's just good to center out a format around a singular event, you know, and just have that there. So yeah, because it just does lead to formats being less active. And yeah, so it's tricky to do. I know that some people will always disagree with that, but the sooner you sort of nail down a given event that you're based around, the better. So yeah, I don't actually know if you can play Xarian and TOS. It is a very powerful card at that time period. You know, one of the best cards in the game for sure. So yeah, but yeah, it's a toss-up, as Prada says. Never know what TOS format you're playing. That's a good one. Maybe that's why they call it TOS format, you know, because it's a toss-up. Ha ha ha. I'm not necessarily sure I would have gone for return here if I was Sentenza. I feel like it's just kind of awkward because you're taking 2550 damage from that. But yeah, what's summoned this turn? So yeah, it will be in defense. But yeah, but you're still taking a lot of damage here. The DD Warrior Lady can be banished at the end of the turn. So you're not really gaining anything long-term from this. So I guess the idea here is that like, okay, well, you know, this blocks off 24 damage. But I don't necessarily think it's worth it because they could have things like Brain Control into a Monarch, into something else. So it's like you're just taking life points there that you didn't necessarily have to take. But yeah, I'm pretty sure you can't change TD there. But good catch, Janjo. Yeah. In GOAT, I think you can change it, Best Toasty. I could be wrong about that. It's weird. There are like some niche battle change rulings that happen over the course of time. Okay, Janjo said no. I trust Janjo on this because Janjo is currently doing some GOAT videos. So I trust Janjo more on this than myself, who is sort of all around the timeline at this point. But yeah, it's weird because it does change over time. So it's tough to say. But MST on the back row, which is another return. Obviously, don't want to go down too low there with activating the return just yet. But yeah, setting another passing back. And yeah. Okay, the best Toasty said, yes, if someone by opponent, you 100% can change it. So now I don't know. This will be interesting here. I think this is a bit tricky. Does Sangan activate first? Yeah, okay. So Soul Exchange happens, Thessalos comes down. I'm pretty sure what happens if the Sangan... It's Seagok rules around this time period is so weird. I think that Sangan might be Chainlink 1, Thessalos Chainlink 2. Because I think it's like the Sangan sent to graveyard first, and so it would like trigger first before the Thessalos comes down. But yeah. Yeah, I don't know when they change that ruling either. A bit tricky. I don't necessarily trust Google AI though. I'm not basing this off Google AI because the thing that AI does is AI just like looks at pattern matching with different things, trained on a data set. It looks at that data set and tries to just like present an answer that seems right, right? And oftentimes it is right. But the issue with this is that maybe AI is looking at like, okay, in Yu-Gi-Oh, you know, if you take control of a monster with brain control, you know, you can or can't do the, you know, change of a battle position here, right? So, it's kind of tricky because you don't necessarily know if it's applying to GOAT format itself or it's just adding GOAT format as a garnish to sort of match the answer to your question. So that can be a bit tricky. But yeah, this match is the ruling question match, honestly, as Prada says here. Yeah, AI loves to recommend you Chaos Ember Dragon for a GOAT format deck. Iconic card. Edson ruling states you cannot change the battle position of a monster in the turn that you summon it. This is different from modern Yu-Gi-Oh. So, yeah, I don't know when that changes or doesn't change. But wait, okay, this is weird. I don't think that Edison ruling's right. In modern Yu-Gi-Oh, you cannot change the battle position of a monster the turn you summon it. That seems weird. Maybe that's a typo, but like that's definitely not right. Yeah, it's very tricky. Okay, so, yeah, how did that ruling work? In the ruling stream, yeah. Okay, in the ruling section. Oh, PJ's messaged in. Dump truck there. Okay, Soul Exchange. Yeah, man, there's a lot of ruling things going on here. Where's Umbrex Sparks for game? That's what I'm saying. That's why everyone needs to play Sparks in their deck. So that 200 damage does come up, you know. In Modern, it's any monster that's summoned even by opponent, I believe. Yeah, so that's how it works in Modern, I'm pretty sure. But the Edison ruling should be saying the opposite, right? Because the Edison ruling says you cannot change the battle position of them. Okay. Yeah, it says it's different from Modern that you can't change. So if it's different from Modern, then it would be that you can change the battle position of a monster the turn that you summon it, which is not how it works, pretty sure. So yeah. Yeah, they're scooping it up. They're like, yeah, GG. I mean, if you search out Frog is 100 damage to you, so you're still alive, but they might not have another Frog there. So, see, the thing is that Seagok doesn't necessarily work that way in this format. I don't know how it works in Seagok, in Reaper, but like Seagok changes over time. So like Seagok had some really weird things about which one goes first and which one goes second at whatever point in the game's history you're at. I'm more familiar with the modern Seagok rulings where it's like, it basically checks. So the way it goes, like, turn player mandatory, non-turn player mandatory, turn player non-mandatory, non-turn player non-mandatory, right? But at different points in the game history, it was not based on that. So that's a very tricky thing. However, I don't think it matters that much that game. I don't think Nintendo was winning that either way there. But, you know, it could come up. It's important to note sometimes. And so, yeah, it's good to have the right rulings, but it's just so tricky to say. Like, I really don't know. But But yeah, definitely a strange way to die. That is how it works here. Yeah, it's just weird. Okay, Sangan triggers first, so Sangan activates first. So yeah, so that's what I was wondering about, because in Modern it would definitely work that way, where like Sangan is Chainlink 1. Now Modern it would work. If Thessal's mandatory, if Thessal's mandatory, then it would work. Thessal's Chainlink 1, Sangan Chainlink 2, right? But back at the time, it would work potentially a different way, because back at the time Seagock was weird, and I know with other things where like Sangan tributing a Monarch, or a Monarch tributing Sangan, like the Sangan would trigger first, as the judge is currently saying in the Discord server. So again, I don't necessarily think it matters that much for this game. Like, would it change the outcome? Probably not. I don't think Nintendo was winning that either way, but it is good to know. And people have won games like that where just very, very low life points. Yeah. Yes, Seagock changed over time. Yeah, it's weird. This is kind of scuffed. Again, it's Seagock is weird at different points in time, Bestosi. I don't know how it works in Goat. Goat format would be the one to look at for this, right? I think Goat has. I think if Goat has, like, let's. Yeah, so we can look at goatformat.com for this. I'll look at goatformat. I'll check this out, and then if I find it, then I'll put the ruling on screen here. How to play, rules, policies, basic mechanics would be the one. Replaying attacks, traps, verifying hand index, failure to find. Simultaneous effects go on chain, but not like that. So let's see. This is the one here for Goat. So these rules change in minor ways throughout the years, particularly in TCG. And Goat form is concerned, they work almost exactly where in current Yu-Gi-Oh, except for one exception. When multiple trigger effects are triggered simultaneously in current format Yu-Gi-Oh, the players will construct a chain with the effect in accordance with the following rules. That's the more modern thing. Go for on these effects works exactly as stated above, with one additional caveat: when two effects were triggered at different times, the earlier triggers may be placed on chain before the later ones. So in other words, if two mandatory effects are triggered in sequence, whether it's part of a chain resolution or through some additional action, you'll construct the resulting chain going through the steps above for each time an effect is triggered. Because of specific rule quirks governing the activation of optional trigger effects, this will basically only come up with steps 1 or 2. Example A. Actually, this is the perfect one here. Example 2. Player A activates Soul Exchange, targeting player B's Sangan. Player A tributes player B's Sangan, tribute summon Thessal's Fire Monarch. In the resulting chain, Sangan's mandatory effect will be Chainlink 1. Thessal's mandatory trigger effect will be Chainlink 2. So that's how it works with, yeah. Yeah, so I'll just send this in the Discord. Yeah, so, okay. Yeah, so very weird. Understandably, understandable why there'd be confusion about that. I don't know. What do we do about this? Chat, what do you think we do about this? Do we let that stand? Do we let it not stand? Hmm. I mean, it feels weird to redo the game. Let's see what Sentenza says. Yeah, it's too late. Yeah, it's tricky. It's tricky because it's like a misrepresented ruling. So it's like not necessarily Sentenza's fault, right? Okay, it looks like they're okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a bit of a mess, but very tricky. We should spend 35 minutes recreating the game state. We could try it. I mean, they were both very low cards, so they could potentially do that. Um, yeah, it's just like it's just rough. I mean, if it was a more of an official thing, um, then that's one thing. But like the casual locals is also another thing too, where like it's just it's very rough. Okay, Sentenza is back. But yeah. So that's why the Seagok thing was tough, because again, like it has changed over the course of time and in very like strange ways. And that's why it's like kind of iffy. But yeah, I probably should have looked into that sooner, but locals, casual rulings, exactly. I mean, if you were having this at the locals, back at the time, like, would the judge actually know how that worked? Maybe not. I don't know. So maybe we're just simulating the full locals experience. But sorry about that, Sentenza. I don't think Sentenza was going to win that one either way, to be fair. But like, it's just kind of rough that they lost the chance to play out further, right? So apologies for that. And we'll try and be better about that in the future. Now we know. Now we know if that ever comes up again. We know how it works in Goat/Reaper. And yeah. So Sentenza is going to start with a sort of in lopsided T set here, because it's like 4 on top, 1 on bottom. So it's kind of a T set in a different way. Soul Exchange is going to be used on that monster there. Sentenza thinking. So no Dust Shoot here. I was kind of expecting a Dust Shoot there. Yeah, as Prada says, Dumptrick had sparked the next draw, so it wouldn't matter there. Solemn right out the gate on that Soul Exchange, not letting that happen, not letting a Mobius come down potentially and blow up the back row, not letting their monster die. So, big play from Sentenza, but it does make sense. They're going to go for Dust Tornado on the TT, and now they're left with 2 back rows of Dumptricks 1. Seems like Dumptruck might be a little bit bricked on Tribute Monsters, but they could also just be waiting it out a bit. Gravedigger Spy flipping up here, so that's going to be 1,200 attacking in, and another 1,200 coming down as well. So it'll be 2,400 total attacking in. But yeah, PJ, you're exactly right. Very, very convoluted how, these simple rulings are. They should be simple, but it's just very, very tricky to actually figure out. That's unfortunately how it is sometimes, though. And yeah, it's one of the things that you wouldn't know unless you'd like seen it before. And yeah, it had lodged deep in the back of my memory because I remember reading through the GOAT rulings page in the past at one point, but it hadn't lodged far up enough in my head to actually come to mind when the situation happened there. So I should have looked up first, how it worked. That's my bad, instead of like yapping in chat. So yeah, that's my bad. But it wouldn't be a locals without a little bit of scuffage, So Treeborn Frog coming back here. So now Dumptrick can bring out a Monarch if they want to. They're going to tribute that for a Thestalos, ripping the last card out of hand here. Sentenza thinking they might have another Solemn here, honestly. I don't think it's a bad time to use it. Looks like they are indeed going to use it there. So they drop down to 2,000, but they are keeping that card in hand. They've got a full board. Dumptrick has nothing here. Oh no. Last Wheel will still trigger here because the Treeborn Frog was tributed. So they still will be able to use this. And yeah, it's rough. Last Will in this format does work, not how it does in GOAT. So you are able to activate it before or after. Yeah, the frog was sent to the grave. The Thestalos won't count for that, but you don't need to. So, yeah, it's a locals exactly as PJ says. So, yeah, it is what it is, Yeah, Last Will could get Stein here. That's brutal, though. That's brutal. Yeah, as Toasty says, Last Will is mega insane in this format. It just goes so hard. Not just in Steinarch decks, but in a lot of decks, you can just use Last Will just to do some crazy stuff. Like, there's like Rescue Cat decks where they OTK you with like pandas and things like that. And they use Last Will to insane degree there. But yeah, they're using it right now for the Frog Tribute. Yep. Yeah. So that is indeed how it works. Yep. And yeah, it feels like a Top Cut match for the amount of ruling disputes, as PJ adds. And yep, it really does. I mean, this is a very intense game. And it's kind of unfortunate that it might end this way. But yeah, it looks like the will is going to come down. And yeah, unfortunately, that is something that's just like, another knowledge check for the format. That's one of the issues with like getting people into Yu-Gi-Oh. And you see the knowledge check most often with like, not knowing what a deck does, right? And so it's like, what did that deck do? I don't know how to actually play against it. And so you lose against it the first time you face it, right? But there are also knowledge checks in terms of just rulings, right? And like weird rulings coming up that like you would not expect to work the way to do. And that can happen even as you get like pretty involved in the game. And yes, so Dumbtrick can summon a monster in any open game state here, so they're not going to do it right now. They're going to activate BrainCon first, taking control of that spy, and then bring out a monster in battle phase, probably. I don't know if I were them, I maybe would have gone for the Stein play here, but I get why they're doing this. They can just go for Sangan, put him on a 2-turn clock. So, yeah, Toasty brings up a good point as well. Edison also has some insane ruling, like the quick draw synchron ruling, where it like activates in hand or doesn't activate in hand or something like that. It's just very weird. So it's just it's something that you have to know if you play the format. And if you play other formats around the same time, it might be confusing for you. But Switch says, for me, Reaper will always feel like bad goat due to Last Will, Stein, and Dimension Fusion are at 3, and Comfy and Darkle are unbanned. Yeah, I understand that perspective on it, too. Cider is going to be pretty good here, though, attacking that Sangan, but Dumbtrick can use that Sangan to get out something else. So, yeah, this is actually an intense game here. But History Whited One says it's not bad goat, though. It's its own thing. And I think people can have their own opinions on that, right? Like, it really does depend on what style of gameplay you prefer. Some people prefer the gameplay they find in Reaper format. Some people prefer the gameplay they find in GOAT format. I don't think there's necessarily one thing or another that, you can say, yes, that's definitively the case. But that's the nice thing about Yu-Gi-Oh, everyone's got their own opinions on how the game is played, and that's fun. Dekoichi getting flipped up here, and DD Worley coming down to deprive Dumbtruck of the free tribute fodder in the form of Treeborn Frog, which is very good because with a Dekoichi up, a Monarch comes down, that just kills you there. So it makes it a bit tricky to navigate when you're so low in life, but Dumbtruck also getting low in life now. Syngenta could pull this one out. They've got 1,000 life points in a dream. Dumbtruck get 2,300 life points if Syngenta has another monster here, and they do. They got a Chaos monster. That's going to be the end of the game. So there we go. Going on to that all-important game 3. Very intense stuff. Never say it's over until it is over. Yeah, very, very cool stuff. Dumbtruck could have gone for a more aggressive line there by last pulling for Stein if they're playing Stein, which, to be fair, I'm not sure if we've seen Stein in Dumbtruck's deck so far. At least I have not seen it in here. Jane just says, winner goes to Worlds, right? Yep, Reaper Worlds. It's a tournament of one. Whoever wins this is just the Reaper Worlds champion, naturally. It would be cool to have other formats with Worlds. But yeah, it's for all the marbles, as Prada says. All the marbles. Who will get that nice little bag of marbles that they can play around with, But yeah, I always find it a bit awkward when formats that are not as big do Worlds, because it's just like, what are you really doing with that Worlds Championship? You need really like a following like GOAT has or like Edison has to really make it like matter a lot. But it'd be cool to see more formats get the amount of people playing such that a Worlds makes sense, Yeah, finals will be back-to-back Stein OTK. It's happened before in these formats. Like, that was what happened in, was it Chaos Return or Stein format? Whichever one. I played against Hoy, and I was on Dark World Burn, and I just managed to just completely sack him, like, both times. It was just brutal. We need Yada Worlds. Honestly, yeah. Like, Yada is so fun. I really want more people to play it, but honestly, the way things are going, we'd probably get a Viper Worlds before Yada Worlds, but Amsterdam World Championship when? That's the question that Clody's asking all the time. There's a user in the community who is very passionate about Amsterdam format. It's fine. Like, it's its own format. Like, they say that it should supplant Chaos format. Like, honestly, I don't think it suppplants Chaos format because it's very different. But Amsterdam is basically just like, a bunch of Reason Gate decks running around, like acting crazy. But yeah, I took everything from Poi. Yeah. Yeah, Yada Worlds, the original Yada was the Worlds Championship right there. But that makes Yada Worlds even more enticing, if we get enough people to play it, But yeah, I mean, if Amsterdam gets enough of a following, I'm sure people will play it. But right now, it's just sort of like a worse format than Chaos from all testing that we've done. Yeah, it's just like it's even more of a tier 0 format, but it's a tier 0 format centered around a deck that's like a lot less interactive. So it's just a bit tricky there. At least from what we've seen so far, right? It definitely could change after further testing, but there's just not really incentive to test it, you know. As PJ said, we just need some YouTubers to hype up Yata. That would be very, very cool. I've always sort of said that like my role on the channel, at least what I'm aiming for, is just to provide breadth, not depth. So just going through all these different formats and sort of showing them off to people, so that way they can sort of get an idea of what's out there, rather than really deep diving on one and really pushing it. But yeah, I think Yata can get that treatment. As History YG1 says, Redo is getting that treatment now as well. So yeah, Yata Worlds over 20 years later would be a great video title. Honestly, it would be cool to do like a 20th anniversary for a lot of these World Championships. But Yata's the only one that I've seen that has like an actual like following, you know. Heavy coming down, probably running into a Solemn Judgment, I assume. Yep, and there goes the Solemn. That's just too juicy of a trade. Syntenta cannot let that go through. But now, you know, this is threatening lethal damage. Okay, it's not quite threatening lethal damage. That might have changed things here for Dumptruck, but it won't matter because Syntenta has the TT, so saying it's actually the better play generally. Jander, you definitely should make a video on that. That'd be very cool. And I feel like the 04 Championship also has some people who like to play it because it's sort of like a more balanced version of Chaos in some ways. We had a locals on it once upon a time. That was pretty fun. But yeah. Toasty, there's a way to change that. You could always play some games either on the YGO from Zero Discord server or format library, or just getting together with friends, building some decks and playing it out. Yata is, I think, one of the most fun formats that I've encountered. It's just so fun. It's peak DM in my opinion, just because of like the way that the games turn out, and they generally always turn out into just super intense grind games at the end, where just both players are in top deck mode situation, drawing into their power cards, and it's just so fun. But yeah, if you don't have time or like you're playing other things, that's also fine. It's just Yata is so fun. I really like it. I'm hooked on Yata. Whenever I play that format, I always have a great time. And yeah, it's just great. Soul Exchange coming down for a side right here, tripping over that Dekoichi, not attacking this turn, but you do have the side for out, threatening a lot of damage next turn. You're depriving your opponent of a draw, potentially. I wonder if Dundrick thought that was a Morphing Jar. That would be an interesting sort of card to bluff there. But it looks like they do draw into another monster there. PJ said there may be a Yata multi-day happening on FL either next month or in June. So perfect time to play that format if you haven't played it before. Format library is a great place for, you know, these tournaments happening. So definitely check that out if you're interested in them. So the way that Yata works, it is the correct ruling for Kaiku and Bazoo and Skull Lair, where you can't banish any card because it happened in Worlds. So you can't do that. So yeah. And also the quick play ruling also works the way that it should work, where you can't activate quick play spells the turn they're set either. So yeah. Andrew White one says there is a version with the incorrect ruling. True, but the Yata that we play is not in that version. So, yep, quick plays cannot be activated the turn they are set. Yeah, so Yata is very nice just in terms of aligning the game a little bit more with the rules that Modern has. And just being a good format, I think, in general. BrainCon coming down here, taking control, probably the Warrior Lady. Yep, there's the Warrior Lady, so you can banish the Frog. But yeah, it is pretty cool. I like it. It's a fun one. Squid said, in my opinion, if we get a 100K plus YouTuber to play Yata, it will become the most popular pre-GOAT format. I would agree. I would say yes. I think that it really just takes people with a big audience to, you know, play it and have fun. And Janjo's working on it. Let's go, Janjo. Yeah. Well, that'd be fun. We got to get people playing it. I think people will enjoy it if they try it out and, you know, see it. And it's just like the games that you can have are just super intense. So, yeah. One of the tokens, yep, one of the tokens is gone. Warrior format could be fun. The issue with Warrior format is that I'm worried people would get scared by Science FDK. I personally don't think Science FDK would be a problem if you have enough people playing Warrior format. But the way that a lot of the smaller Warrior events have gone lately is that Scientist FDK has featured in it. And I sort of mentioned this a bit ago in one of my videos or streams, where like the issue with Scientist FDK being in a small event is that it has a much more outsized presence in that event, right? Even if Scientist FDK is not a deck that would actually consistently be able to win a big event, like a 100-player tournament, if it could consistently win a small event, which means that it plays less games and thus has to get less lucky, then you will have more people playing it potentially. And also that represents a larger percentage of the people that, actually attend the tournament. So honestly, I think Science FTK is majorly just a problem of the format being small, but it could scare away a YouTuber from actually getting into Warrior. So I think Warrior would be fun though. Which ones are the game-ruining power cards in Yada? Honestly, I don't think there are too many game-ruining ones. Imperial Order is definitely one that is very frustrating to deal with. I think Mirage of Nightmare is also a bit tricky, but like Mirage of Nightmare can be a double-edged sword more than Imperial Order. But I'd say Imperial Order is the big one. That one's just like so unfun. The hand rips are also frustrating, obviously, but like in my opinion, the hand rips themselves are less frustrating than Dust Shoot, because Dust Shoot, as I mentioned before, it can just majorly backfire on you. Also, the hand rips themselves don't give you perfect hand knowledge on the following turn, which I think is the key difference there. So, yeah. When is Silly Snake format Worlds happening? I don't know, Prada, but that would be fun to see. I would like to see that as well. Very, very silly format. Triple Sinister Serpent, triple Graceful Charity, just a lot of silliness going on. But yeah, I'll say most of the time Yada isn't super dominated by like a power card coming down and just ending the game and being unfun, right? Wicked Worm Worlds, let's go. We got to get Worm format back on the map. SDYK format. Mill versus Wicked Worm Beast Turbo. The best Wicked Worm Beast has ever been. I love it so much. Wicked Worm Beast, that is. The format itself is kind of rough unless you like mill matches, but Wicked Worm Beast is fun. Snatch on the Tomato, and that'll get in for 3,100 here, but a bit of a risky proposition given that Tomato can be attacked over and get out something else. So that makes it a bit tough here, but if Dumptruck doesn't have other monsters in hand to actually get over that, then it's pretty good. Also, if Sentenza has some back row to stop that, then that's also pretty good. We'll have to see exactly what happens here. This is an intense game. It's honestly really intense. Coming down to the wire here. We know Heavy Storm is gone, I believe, as well. Brincon on probably the Assailant. That is probably the worst possible outcome for Sentenza. But to be fair, there's no real way to play around this. So you kind of had to go for it either way. Like, that's sort of an idea that, like, pops up sometimes where, like, you sometimes have to make plays that lose certain power cards because you can't afford to play around them because you lose either way if you play around them. Stein coming down to get in a little bit of extra damage here, and that should probably be enough because you attack in over Tomato, and that just pokes in for just enough to close things out here. But Sentenza might have a Battle Trap they can use on whatever is brought out. Oh, they're not going for lethal. They're just going to try and poke in, remove the card from hand, and then get in for a bit of extra chip damage with the Stein. I like it. I do like that play. I think it's pretty good. Sentenza does retain the Assailant, but now they're very, very low on life, which is very scary for them. So now it becomes a bit trickier. Do you actually attack into what Dumptruck has here, or do you potentially not gamble on it and switch the Assailant to defense? They're going to attack in. I think that is the smart thing to do. You lose to a Monarch, but you lose to a Monarch anyways most of the time. Snatch Steal is going to be a bit rough here, but Heavy Storm is the last backer, so that's not going to help. And that's going to be a bit of a rough one. So GG's all around. Very intense games here. Unfortunately, the first game was kind of scuffed, but that does happen sometimes in these events, and that's how it's going to be sometimes. But yeah, congrats to Sentenza here for doing very well in this event. So yeah, unfortunately the game one issue did happen, but that does sometimes happen here. So what I'm going to do now, because people express interest in me doing a blind 5Ds format tier list ranking, what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch the scene while I actually find a tier list like that. So let me just do this. So you get to see my lovely face in close up. But let me see if I can find a tier list just ready to go on Tier Maker. Let's see. Yu-Gi-Oh! Formats. I'm going to look up and see if that gets us there. Yu-Gi-Oh! Formats. Okay, Yu-Gi-Oh! Formats. That's not all of them. Format Library Yu-Gi-Oh! Formats. Is this it? This seems like some of them. I don't know which ones apply to which things, though. So, Yu-Gi-Oh! Formats tier lists. All Yu-Gi-Oh! Formats. The 30. Oh, no, that's a lot. Yeah, I don't know where there's a good one, but I'll say answer chat as well. Best way, yes, that build by Sentenza is something he threw together himself, or is it a new thing? Yeah, I think it's a new thing. So basically, someone in chat earlier mentioned me doing a blind tier list of all the Yu-Gi-Oh 5Ds tier list. Okay, I think I found a thing here. So let me switch this to the thing. Yeah. So they want me to basically blind rank the 5Ds formats. Just before I get to them. And I think that's a neat idea because normally I just do the tier list after I go through the formats and have an educated sort of idea of what they're about. But this is sort of a neat idea, just trying to rank them preemptively. So I like that. For a baseline, let me just put in some of these other formats, I guess. So I guess, well, I guess these all go into never played. So I can adjust these. I'm just going to adjust them like S tier, A tier, B tier, C tier. Most of these will be performance I've never played, D tier and F tier. So basically S tier is a format that I think that anyone can enjoy, and I would just happily play it with anyone. A tier is a format that I think is very, very good. I would play it, but it maybe not like universal like the S tier ones. B tier is a format that I think is a bit more specific. So you have to I think you can get people into this, but if people don't like a specific style of gameplay, they might not like this. C tier is sort of similar, but it's a style of gameplay that I think will not appeal to as many people. D tier is like a very, very niche type of player can enjoy this. And then F tier is a format I think like no one can enjoy, right? So some examples of formats that I'd put in here. Yugi Kaiba, I'd put in probably C tier right now because Stall Mill is kind of a rough matchup that people don't like to play. Critter is an S tier format because it's just great Yu-Gi-Oh all around. It is definitely leans more control, but I do think it's still fun. Treasure would be either B tier or A tier. I'm not going to focus too much on it. I'm going to put in B tier along with Imperial. I think they're very similar. They are sort of a niche style of play, but they're still fun. Android, tier 0 format, so it can't be S tier in my opinion, but it's still very good. Joey Pegasus, I would put in D tier. I'd put it below Yugi Kaiba, honestly. So, I mean, yeah, and Best Toad says I watched some Critter replays and almost fell asleep. Some people will not like this as much. I think playing it is a lot better than spectating it because spectating, you're not in the moment. You're not constantly thinking about what your opponent's got and stuff. So it's not necessarily as enjoyable to watch, but it's definitely very enjoyable to play. Fiber format, I'm going to put an A tier. I know that some people would have an S tier. I think personally it's an A because to me it feels like a slightly worse version of Yada format. I'd put Yada at like the top of S tier. I think anyone can enjoy this. I've talked about this a ton in the stream actually, so I think it's really fun. Scientists, either F or D. I think like Scientist FDK is still a problem. It's not the best deck in the format from what people have seen, but it still is annoying, so I'm going to put an F tier. Vampire format, I would put it in B, high B. I think it's a very particular style of play that not everyone will enjoy, but it is a very good format for if you want to practice your aggressive fundamentals. It's very tempo-based format, very fun that way. Chaos format, I will also put in B. I think it's like very sacky, but it is fun. Some people don't enjoy it. Maybe this does belong in C. I'm going to place it in C, actually, because I feel like there are a lot of people who are turned off by that level of power, so that's very fair. Warrior format, I'm going to put it in A. This used to be for S for me, but because of the modern, just like the state of Warrior tournaments right now, I have to put it in A. I think with time this could rise to S, but right now I have to put it there. Goat, S tier. For me personally, I'd rank it probably below Yada, but it definitely on top for a reason. Cyber format, I would also put probably in B tier. I don't think any format with Stein OTK running around, and yes, I know Goat format has Stein, but I'm talking about Stein OTK with the Cyber Fusions running around. I don't think that any format with that can be higher than B for me, but I'm just going to put it in B. I'd probably put Reaper in B as well. As we saw today, the games can be very, very fun. So I do enjoy it a lot, and it will always have a soft spot in my heart because it's where I started playing Retro Yu-Gi-Oh! Online. Chaos Return format, I know people like this format, and listen, this is just my opinion. I'm going to put it in C. I personally like it a little bit less than Cyber format, and I can't place it above Reaper format just because Reaper format has that nostalgia for me. So this is my own personal biased opinion. I know some people like this, the best of the Stein formats. For me, it's not quite there, but I will put it in C for that respect. Stein format, I'm going to put in D. I think this takes a very special type of player. The format sort of centralized entirely around just Stein OTKs and nonsense with Ring of Destruction, things like that. So I don't think it's quite there for me. Chimera Tech format, very, very fun. I'm going to put it slightly below Yada just because Yada has a bit more of a fun factor for me because it's just so crazy. My Chimera Tech format is peak GX for me. I think if you think about the GX era in terms of like how it plays, I think Chimera Tech is probably similar to what you're thinking of more than GOAT. So I think that Chimera Tech is sort of the standard bearer for the GX era, and I like it a lot. Airblade format, F tier. I'm just going to... It's basically just like an uninteractive combo deck that is not really fun. I mean, I like comboing off with it, but it's not really fun to like think about in terms of like competitive sense. Demise format, I think this format's really fun. I'm going to put it in B tier. I think Demise and Trooper are similar enough. I'm going to put them on top of B. They're both very aggressive, so not everyone will like that, but I think they're fun to play, and if you don't take them too seriously. Zombie format is basically just perfect circle format. I don't even like placing diving format on this board because it's just perfect circle. I'm going to place perfect circle in S, honestly, because I think it deserves it. I think it's very good. I personally enjoy it slightly more than GOAT just because I like perfect circle Monarch as a deck a bit better than Chaos Turbo, but I think it's very fun. And yeah, Zombie would be basically the same spot, but I mean, it's just like, I don't like formats that are too similar to other ones, so they feel just like an inferior version, and I feel like Zombie is like that, so for me, it gets an A. But again, very subjective. Phantom format is still on this list for some reason. I have not played much Phantom format. I don't think it's that good. It's basically dad return format, but without, you know, any hits to the deck. You could argue dad return format. It's also like that, but frankly, Phantom format, it's just like, I don't know, it'd go where like basically dad return format goes, which is like D tier. I'm gonna place dad return D tier again. Warrior format, or Warrior deck is dominating GOAT format right now. Very, very cool. I do like seeing Warrior do well in GOAT. So very neat. I still think it comes down to sort of like what I mentioned earlier, where like in GOAT format, I still think Chaos Turbo is widely regarded to be the best deck, but because it is, Warrior is now able to sort of get in there and counter it a bit. But if you want to do well in a GOAT event with a Warrior deck, you definitely need to have a very like high level of skill in that matchup. I'm not saying that the Chaos Turbo players do not have a very high level of skill, because we've seen some of the best GOAT players play Chaos Turbo and play it very, very well. But I will say that, like, I do think that Chaos Turbo is still going to be the best deck in the format right now, maybe with consistent, you know, results over time and the meta shifting to adapt to Warrior as opposed to Chaos Turbo. Maybe that will change, but in my opinion, it's still sort of Chaos Turbo dominated. But yeah, as PJ says, it's low skill floor, high skill ceiling. That's sort of how that deck works. Whereas I think Warriors has a higher skill floor, personally, if you want to play it very well in that format. So I would still place it, I'd still play it in S. I'd still classify it as being sort of like Chaos Turbo being the top dog. Because most of the time you play it, you will be facing, like, it's kind of like when you discuss tier lists for games, like in terms of like what the best decks are, a lot of the times those tier lists will be focused on like the highest levels of competitive play, because, you know, that's what, if you're making a niche video on a topic, you're probably going to imagine it being like the optimum, like everyone's playing perfectly out of their minds and all that stuff. But if you're talking about like at a local level where like plays maybe a bit more casual, unless you have a cracked locals, Chaos Turbo is probably still going to be dominated, but also at a local, people are going to bring more of their pet deck, so it kind of shifts the narrative a bit more there. But that's not really what you were talking about. You were talking about like the highest level of play, and I think Warriors can dominate the highest level of play, but if you drop the level a bit more of the skill, I think that Warriors does fall off a little bit more. But that's just my personal take. I'm not a full-time GOAT tuber, you know, so people who covered a lot more than me definitely will have better opinions on that than me. So take it with a grain of salt. But that's just sort of my opinion from what I've seen. So, yeah, and PJ said there's a substantial difference between average Chaos Turbo players and pro Chaos Turbo players, and that is very true. Anyways, Gladiator format is next. I like Gladiator because I like the Gladiator Beast matchup, but I feel like the average player will not like this as much, so I'm going to put it in C tier. And now we get to the 5Ds formats. So they will go from about Teledad to, I believe, Librarian. Because I think that's the Spore one's Tengu Plant. So I don't know why they didn't have Reborn Tengu for Tengu Plant, but I think it goes from Teledad to Librarian here. So starting off with the blind 5Ds tier list, now that we have this all set up, we're actually going to start off with a format that I'm not blind to. I actually have played Teledad a fair bit. We have a Teledad tournament going on in the Discord server right now, and I've played a fair bit of games in this format, and I think this format is personally very fun. I do think, though, that if you don't like tier 0 formats, you're not going to like this one. And I do think that some games can be a little bit sacky. That's another thing as well. So because of that, I would probably place it. So here we get into the bias. For me, it would be a B tier. For the average player, it would be a C tier. I'm going to place it in B because it's my list, so I can do what I want with it. But I'll place it in B tier. I think it's a fun time. I think the matchup's fun. And sometimes you just get into these very interesting game states that are just like, you know, very, very cool to actually, you know, do stuff. Hopefully Gravekeepers don't get robbed. Well, there is. You'll see what my thoughts are on that later on. But I do have predictions with that format, and we'll see what happens there. But next up, we got Cat format. Cat format is a format that I've not played personally. I did stream a single-day event in this format once, and I've also heard a lot of people talk about this format. And from what I've heard, this format is awful. This format's really bad. Basically, you have like full powered Blackwings and full powered like Kato DK decks that can go into Dark Strike Fighter, but every deck can go into Dark Strike Fighter as well. So basically, every deck is sort of like racing to just kill the opponent as quickly as possible. So it's kind of like a dynamic that you have in like Reaper format, where a lot of decks are just going to Dino DK. But you have some diversity in how they get to there. But also every deck is doing that. Like there's no like sort of deck that can be like, okay, this deck's going to be the deck that, you know, if you get them below this point, like then they turn into a grind game and the games are actually like really good. But like basically, yeah, it's just F tier. Like when you have decks or when you have formats that are just like all about killing the opponent as quickly as possible without any other types of decks in that format, it just kind of meh. It's not really the best. Lightsworn format. I've heard great things about this. I can't necessarily judge this format myself because I've actually never played this format. I believe I did stream it at one point. I think that from what I saw there, it looked really fun. I'm going to take a big swing. I'm going to put an S tier along with Edison. I heard it's like a variation of Edison. And so if it's like Warrior to Goat, you know, and Lightsworn Edison, if that's the analogy, I think it probably will be like an S tier Edison. I've actually played Edison a little bit, so, you know, this is not quite blind for me, but Edison is one of the most popular formats in the game's history for a reason, so I think it will be S tier. And as a note for these blind ones, I'm not placing them somewhere in the list themselves. Like, I'm not being like, oh, Lightsworn's below Critter because Critter's better than it. I'm just placing it in the tier itself because I think, since I'm going in blind, I really have no idea where it falls, like, in these lists themselves. I can just guess for the tier. Frog format. If I had to guess, I would put it in F tier because this is Frog FDK format. You're just playing around with Frog FDK. And I mean, some people like FDK decks. Most people do not. And I feel like if you've got a format with an FDK deck running around that's very, very good, it's not necessarily going to be the best thing in the world. So I'm going to put it in F tier. I believe it's X-Saber format. X-Saber format is now no longer on Format Library because I think people did not like it. And it was very similar to some other formats running around the time. So I don't even know if I'm going to cover X-Saber format, but I feel like it's an F tier. It's just like Frog FDK, where Tier 0 X-Sabers, they're a cool deck. I like X-Sabers overall, but I don't like it as much as something like Gladiators and things like that. So it also uses the broken Dark Soul ruling, which is kind of it's kind of BS. So like, I don't know. I'm just going to place it in F tier personally. Star Trek format, that is the one with Gravekeepers, I believe. And from what I've heard, it's mainly just Gravekeeper Central. Like, Gravekeepers is a crazy good deck, and it really gatekeeps a lot of the meta. Because of that, I'm going to place it in either D or C. I'm leaning more towards D, personally, from what I've heard and from what I've seen. If you don't know, I was one of the people running a sort of War League for these retro formats. And a War League is sort of like a big thing where like different teams compete in different formats. And we had a bunch of different formats in the league, and Star Trek was one of the formats there. And people just generally hated it. Like, they were really not happy with this format at all. And from seeing some of the games that went on in it, I understand why. Because, you know, Gravekeepers, they can be fun if you're playing them. If you're playing against them, they can be a bit frustrating. Especially if you're playing a deck that wants to rely on the graveyard a little bit. Gravekeepers can sort of shut you out of the meta. So I'm going to place that in D tier personally. Samurai, this is going to be a controversial pick. I'm going to place it in C. I just love Six Sam so much. I think they're very, very fun. Even the sort of broken version where you have the Synchro Shien and you have just so many ways to get to it, along with Gateway to the Six and all that stuff. It's just like, this thing is crazy. Like, but it can be occasionally fun, like Chaos format. You know, it's like, it's fun sometimes to play a format not high power. And so I will place it in C tier. I think it's neat. I love Gravekeepers. So that's what we're going to do with it. Next up, we've got Trishula format. Just checking on Format Library when that is. It's YCS Providence 2011, June 19th to 20th. I don't know. I like Trish. I don't know much about this format personally. I would probably guess a B or A tier. I feel like, honestly, it might be A tier. And the reason for this, honestly, it's kind of a weird reason, personally. But I feel like if you wind up with a format that is in an era that does not have many good formats, and this format is somewhat playable, it becomes the sort of de facto one that you go to for that era, if you want to experience that time in the game's history and experience what things were like then. And so I feel like, you know, even if it's not as just objectively good as some of the other formats that are, you know, at this level, I feel like because it is sort of the best of the ones around it, it probably is going to be in A tier because it's like the one from that time. And I feel like there's something to be said for having a representative format of a time period. It's kind of like how, like, I'd say Cyber or Reaper is probably like one of the best of these Stein formats, right? And because it is better than the other Stein formats, it's sort of buoyed up by like people who want to play around that time period, but don't necessarily want to deal with some of the BS that comes in the more extreme Stein formats. Librarian format is, I believe, the last of these. Again, this is sort of a format that was taken off of Format Library. I think it was just too similar to Providence. And because of that, I'd probably put in like B or C. Let's put in B. Librarian's neat. Do we have an average game length for each format? That's a very good question. I actually don't know off the top of my head. I don't know if those stats are also recorded in different places. If I had to guess, Teledad games probably take like a decent amount of time, like maybe half an hour on average. Of course, depending on how much people get sacked. Cat games probably 15 to 20 minutes, just because like they go quick, maybe even less time than that. Star Trek games, those probably go a fair bit because Graveyards is not a fast deck. So I'd say this probably is also higher up, maybe like 40 minutes, I would guess. 40 minutes to an hour, maybe. Depends on how grindy the game gets. Samurai games, probably like very quick, kind of like Cat, where, one player can probably just win very quickly. So I'd probably say this thing is like 15 minutes to 20 minutes. Librarian games, I really don't know much about the format. I just know it's very similar to Providence. So I'd probably say this is like, I don't know, it's probably like half an hour. I'd say that's like generally the average of like a Yu-Gi-Oh game around this time, probably. Same with Providence. And then Lightsworn and Edison. It really does depend on the decks that you play. But I would guess that these are probably like, yeah, it really does depend on the decks that you play. Like, because these are very diverse formats. I don't think that some of the others aren't, because they probably are. But I would say that, yeah, it's just tricky. I don't actually know. That would be very interesting. There probably is the data on that for Edison, at least. Someone's probably got that number down there in a sheet somewhere. But I really can't say for Edison and for Lightsworn. So, yeah, that'd be my guess for the average game length. But yeah, that's sort of like my blind list. So you can just look at the 5Ds symbols here, not the stuff before it. I guess I should bring these out. Oh, X-Sabers is probably also very quick. Frog is also probably... Well, Frog can be... It depends on how long the combo goes. But Frog is just... Frog's going to be very toxic, so people might just concede very quickly. But yeah, Frog actually goes probably like half an hour, even though you're getting FTK'd, because the combo does take a long time. So yeah, I don't know how long X-Sabers would go. This is probably on the quicker side, because X-Sabers doesn't necessarily kill you slowly. So yeah. But yeah, as Drew Wide once said, it does depend on the strategy. So like what decks are playing. And yeah. And Frog FTK does also depend on if it FTKs or not, as Drew Wide once says as well. One of the nice things about Frog FTK is that they actually have backup plans if they don't FTK on the first turn. And that's one of the things that is very skill testing when you're piloting the deck, is knowing when to pivot into going for sort of a defensive board, or just going for full FTK. And yeah, it's a very tricky deck to pilot, even though it does FTK very consistently. So yeah, it's tough to say. Tough to say for all these, but very, very good question. Yeah, so that's going to do it for my blind 5Ds sort of ranking here. Hopefully this was enjoyable to watch, and hopefully it sort of whet your appetite for the times to come. Now, I will say, I am still planning on doing a tournament every month, but the coverage for these formats might be a bit shorter than I did in GX. Partially because I'm just busy, but partially because a lot of these formats, if you may see from my ranking, are not necessarily like the most enjoyable for a lot of people. And I've learned in the past, like when I've done just a ton of videos for formats that people do not just generally enjoy, it was both not really the best for like the channel, and also not really best for just like me, because I was just kind of like, yes, I can do XYZ Dragon Cannon in like Scientist format, but like, does that really matter? Like, not really. It's just sort of like a waste. And so I probably just not really do many videos for a lot of these formats, just because they're very, very quick. I will say though, like there will be some fun things like Edison. I'm planning on just collaborating with Edison content creators, because basically just like what I did with GOAT, where when I got to GOAT format, I just collaborated with a bunch of GOAT content creators. And I thought that was a fun thing to do. So I'm planning on doing something very similar to Edison format. And it should be a fun way to hopefully get people into the community a bit more. I'm also very excited for Lightsworn format, Best Toasty. So I'm looking forward to it. I'll be playing games with that relatively soon because that is the format after Cat, and I don't think I'll be in Cat that long. So, yeah, so that, Lightsworn will also have a tournament in, I think, 2 months' time because next month is Cat, and then I believe the format after Cat is just Lightsworn. So, yeah, the format after Cat is Lightsworn. And so that should be happening relatively soon. So, yeah, there's a lot of nostalgia around this time period for me as well. This was really a time, like, I would go to all the sneak peek events, and so I really have a lot of affection for the 5Ds era, even though the average format in the 5Ds era seems like pretty rough, especially compared to some of the other eras that we've covered so far. But listen, we've been through some bad times before. Like the Stein formats were rough, right? That was back-to-back formats of kind of rough gameplay. But, we made it through those. We'll make it through these. And maybe we'll even uncover that some of these formats are not as bad as they might seem. So I'm looking forward to exploring them with all y'all. If you want to, stay up to date on that, subscribe to the channel, doing the whole YouTuber thing. Yeah, stream's still going. Someone asked for a blind Edison format tier list, so I figured I'd do that. And I also put all the other formats in the tier list as well. So yeah, and then eventually we'll get to blind Zexal era tier list, which should be fun. And then blind Arc V, blind Link, all that stuff. So should be good times. But yeah. Yeah, tier lists, I have a love-hate relationship with tier lists because I feel like a lot of the times people can read too much into them when a tier list is generally a very personal thing. Because like, this may be my tier list for these formats, but you may completely disagree and have different formats on here that you like a lot more. Like Yu-Gi Kaiba, I know a lot of people have this in S tier, but for me personally, it's not my cup of tea anymore. But especially the way the modern Yu-Gi Kaiba is sort of shaken out. But that's just me. Cat channel tonight. Yeah, I'll probably make a cat channel since there's been a fair amount of discussion in the general channel of the Discord server. So that'll probably come tonight, and especially because I'm going to be having cat locals next week. So look forward to that. But that's going to do it for this stream. I hope you enjoyed as always. Hopefully y'all liked this sort of bonus at the end of it. Let me know if you want me to do more bonus things on the end of these local streams in the future. And let me know what you thought about the stream as a whole, But yeah, next week's locals will be cat, and it should be a lot of fun. So see y'all next week, and hope you have a good one. Peace.